240 elk and almost 100 bighorn sheep. Excited on what that means as we move forward, what we learn from those collars. It's a monumental effort by a lot of people in this room, biologists, partners, and others. Thank you for that effort. I'm constantly impressed as we go about to multiple meetings and discuss our collaring program and the information we get with other states on just how successful that is and what that means for us. So thank you for your effort and your time on that. This year we had about $6.5 million raised in conservation permit funding, and that was committed to habitat restoration, migration, research, and other projects, which was amazing to see. Just to break down some of those numbers to mule deer specific, which I like to look at differently. The mule deer, by the numbers, we have about 133 projects completed in year 2025 for mule deer. There was about 114,000 total acres restored. We had over 50 funding partners and about $55 million invested, and those that money came from sportsmen's organizations, state, federal partners, and other. And so really working hard to put the money back on the ground, grateful for the success of the conservation permit program, for WRI, for Habitat Council, for these organizations that come and dedicate time into making sure that our wildlife have everything that they need habitat-wise to be successful. Talk a little bit about aquatics for a second. I know that many of you have heard about our wound fin program. I think that this one is super exciting and highlights a lot of hard work and success. Currently, we're in the middle of this story, but I'm excited to report on it. There's a pretty high likelihood that we do not have any wound fin left in the wild, and they operate or they live in the Virgin River, down the Virgin River Basin in St. George. There were only 500 left in captivity, and for multiple reasons, captivity wasn't being very successful in helping broodstock there and reproduce. And so the Division of Wildlife flew down and brought 250 back to our Aquatic Research Center in Logan in November of 2025. And our biologists and researchers at the Aquatic Research Center there in Logan have been working really hard to try to get them to spawn and to reproduce. And currently we have hundreds of young fish with no deaths to the adults, and the fish continuously spawn and look very healthy. I'm excited for what this brings for this success story. We've gone from the potential of losing them all in entirety to watching our aquatic staff just so incredibly spawn them, reproduce, and I think it's going to be one of those stories that we tell for years on how we were potentially saved a species from extinction. So a lot of good going on. I think maybe I've been a little long already. I will end with we're coming into our field season on multiple species all throughout the spring and summer. We would like to make sure that everybody here has an opportunity to come and participate in what we have going on. We will be doing goose banding, I think, the first week of June usually. There's a lot of spawning effort that takes place in the spring. We have classification and different events all throughout the summer. So we will make you aware of those as they come about. We hope that you can hop in a truck with one of the biologists and participate in those events. But with that, Mr. Chair, that is my division update.
Thank you, Director Peck. We'll now move to agenda item number 5, our legislative update and rule amendment. This is an informational, and we'll have Justin Shannon and Steve Kaiser to present that.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Justin Shannon. I'm a deputy director with the division, and I work as the legislative liaison as well. So just got a quick update or a presentation for you in a minute. If not, I'm happy to start without the presentation. Maybe that's the best way to go. I'll get rolling, and if it pops up, great. And if not, I'll just give it. So this at the legislative session this last year, it was really good. We had it was the second year that we had our Sportsman's Caucus. The Sportsman's Caucus is an advisory committee made up of 16-member organizations, hunting NGOs. Oh, here it is. This is great. Okay, thank you, Paul. All right. This year we heard 12 proposed bills that could potentially impact wildlife. So essentially how this works is if a legislator has a bill that's wildlife related, they come and they present it to their peers and to this advisory committee. And then this advisory committee takes positions on the bills, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, how to improve it, how to do these types of things. And then from there, we go and test, there's a voice that goes and testifies at committee hearings. The Wildlife Board has a voice on that board. It's Paula, and Paula, appreciate you helping this year with the caucus. Here are the 7 bills I want to give updates on today. The first is WMA amendments, HB 30 from Representative Schallenberger. And then we also have the Goshen Bay WMA bill, Wildlife Amendments bill, land management funding amendments, also some stuff with energy and HB 412, Wildlife Crossings Amendment by Representative Chu, and then finally the State Land Access Road Amendments. There were a lot of other bills, but these I think are the highlight ones, so I'll spend a few minutes on them. So with HB 30, this is our WMA amendments bill. The changes that were made with this was it repealed the requirements to hold a hunting and fishing license or a combination license to enter a WMA in counties of the first and second class. This was passed last year, and immediately after it passed, there was a lot of frustration. And so we had legislators, mostly in Utah County, from the House and the Senate, who said, is there a way to tweak this? And so how it works now is anyone that's 18 or older is required to obtain an access permit, and you get that by watching a free educational video that'll be on a QR code on all of our signs. If you still have a hunting or fishing license, you don't have to do that. You can just enter the WMA. But this is a way to educate the public about what these properties are, how they were funded, what their intended purpose is. And there's a lot of confusion with WMAs on people say, well, it's just public land, multiple use, and really there's a foundation there that these properties are for wildlife and their habitats. And then if we can do things in addition to that don't erode that foundation or that purpose of having them, we can explore those things. So anyways, this will, right now it's for the first and second class counties, but that's going to expand to all counties in the next 2 years. With HB 93, this is the Goshen Bay WMA. Goshen Bay is on the south end of Utah Lake, and we've had quite a few bills over the last several years on obtaining lands from forestry, fire, and state lands and converting those into a WMA and managing them that way, I guess is a better way to say it. And this would require an MOU between us and our partners with forestry, fire, and state lands, and it just gives some added purpose and protection for wildlife in these areas. The next bill is HB 111. This was ran by Representative Bridger Bollender out of Tooele, and the changes made here was it caps the late harvest reporting fee at $25. And so if you remember a few years ago as a wildlife board, you passed a thing that said we're going to have mandatory harvest reporting for all these big game hunts, which was a good change. One of the challenges that we heard from this last year and legislators heard was that the fee in some cases for not reporting on time was more than the cost of the permit. And that was frustrating for some individuals. And so they wanted that scaled back to 25. It also simplifies how we can post real property purchases. Historically, it's been in newspapers, and it's 2026. So we thought maybe websites would be a better way to go and we could reach a broader audience. So that's how we went with it. Also, it adds nurse practitioner to the list of persons able to provide proof of disability for variances and other things. In the past, that's been a physician or a physician assistant, but nurse practitioners are right there, and in rural Utah and other places, they're heavily utilized and preferred, and so this is a good change for us. We also, the bill gives the division some direction on grizzly bear management. And so right now we've had grizzly bears get fairly close to entering Utah. I mean, within like 3 miles. out of Wyoming in the past. And so we've talked about what would happen if a bear came into our state and what would that look like given that we don't have management authority over them. So really what this bill does is it directs us to contact the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to remove that grizzly bear. And then finally on this bill, on our WMAs, it allows the discharge of a firearm within 300 feet of a structure without written permission because these lands are intended for hunting. Some other things with this bill, there was a bill, HB 168, the Hunting and Fishing Guide Amendments. At the last day, I think it was, that got wrapped into HB 111. And so throughout the whole session, it wasn't there, but this is where it ended up. This is the guide and outfitting bill. It removes spotters. In the past, we've had spotters, guides, and outfitters, but there was a lot of confusion between what constitutes the roles and duties of a spotter versus a guide. This just removes it to clarify it. You can have 2 guides on general season hunts and 3 guides on limited entry and once-in-a-lifetime hunts. It allows for the reimbursement of investigative costs associated with undercover operations for our divisional law enforcement. And the other thing it does is that it provides penalties for wildlife violations for pilots. And so if they're harassing wildlife or aiding in illegal activity, there's some penalties there. So HB 376, really love this bill from Representative Albrecht. It establishes a Utah Forest Restoration Initiative at USU, and it provides funding to that institute. And really what it's going to do long-term is it's going to augment money to our watershed restoration initiative for projects at high elevation summer ranges and high elevation transition ranges. This is really good. And I think a lot of this was spurred on by the Monroe fire and other events like that in the past few years. HB 412, Energy Development Planning Amendments. This is a bill. We're starting to get a lot of wind and solar projects on the landscape in Utah. And if they're big enough, this would require consultation with the DWR. We'd have 30 days to do that consultation and provide a short report on best practices. And this is important for you as a board because it grants rulemaking authority for those procedures. So you'll be seeing something on this shortly. And then 2 more, HB 431, our wildlife crossing amendments. This sets aside $2 million from UDOT's budget, and it sets it aside for wildlife underpasses, overpasses, and fencing, and 10% of that money's got to be used for livestock safety as well. It also creates an opportunity through us and the DMV that you could donate to this cause. And then the last bill I wanted to talk about was HB 444, State Land Access Road Amendments. This bill does a few things, but for us, the first is it requires DWR to coordinate with counties when we're going to permanently close a road. This kind of is a change from HB 103 from the last legislative session in 2025, and so this is fine for us. It's a good spot for us to say, if we're going to permanently close a road, let's go communicate with the county and coordinate well with them. And the other thing it does is it allows shooting from a Class D road. So, if Brock's hunting on the pronghorn on the Parker, now you can legally shoot across these roads that you didn't know existed, Brock. So this will be great. Some upcoming rule revisions. Here's some things that we'll be bringing forth. R 657-28 will have to make some changes based on HB 30. Law enforcement will bring forth some changes for the guide and outfitting rule based on HB 111. And then we'll need a new rule for HB 412, the Energy Development Planning Amendments. A couple things on financial impacts. You might have heard that in January, I think it was January or February, I can't remember which month, we hit our max on the Coyote Bounty program. Historically, that budget's been about $500,000 from the general fund. In the last few years, it's been about $250,000. With the changes to have $100 for the take of a coyote and deer habitat and $50 everywhere else, that added a lot of popularity to the program. We had a lot of new first-time people enrolling in that, and which is great. And so as a result, we talked to the legislature. They gave us $200,000 additional for this fiscal year and an additional $200,000 ongoing. So that program should be in pretty good shape moving forward. We talked about late fee harvest. Another one is the species protection account. Starting next year, we'll have an $800,000 decrease and from the brine shrimp money that's here on the lake, and that money will be diverted to forestry, fire, and state lands moving forward. And then one thing finally is in 2025, we got $50 million for SITLA block purchases. And we got that money to be non-lapsing, so we can use it if it takes a little longer. So, and that was a lot. Paula, did I miss anything?
No, I think you got all of that.
Okay.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, Justin, great report. The 50 million non-lapsing for the SITLA block purchases.
Yeah.
Has there been publicly identified SITLA parcels, or is that just a war chest as things evolve to be able to purchase some?
No, it's a good question. No, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge that we've been looking specifically at the roadless area and the Book Cliffs. And so, and that's probably our highest priority. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the RAC chairs? All right, thank you, Justin. Okay, our next one is also an informational presentation. That'll be by Mike Wardle, Big Game Program Coordinator. Oh, sorry.
Am I on? Okay. Again, Steve Kaiser, Assistant Attorney General with the Attorney General's Office. I represent the Division of Wildlife. So some of what I have to say is going to be a little bit redundant after Justin spoke, but I'm going to be presenting to the board rule updates. These are technical rule changes that we're required to comply with the legislation that Justin just talked about from the 2026 session. So it's informational only. All of these rules are referenced in your packet. Because they're required by statute, technical by nature, that's why we're not having discussions with the RAC or the Wildlife Board on these. So the first one is R6579, which is the waterfowl rule. The major update, which Justin referenced, was the creation of the Goshen Waterfowl Management Area. So that was added to the rule. Justin also referenced the change in distance from 600 to 300 feet within a building on a WMA where you can discharge a firearm. So there were some WMAs referenced in the rule that needed to be updated that you could discharge from 300 feet out. The next several rules are 657, 12, 13, 30, and 42 all relate to proof of disability, injury, or sickness. And as Mr. Shannon mentioned, nurse practitioners can now be part of the evidence that you present to either get a refund or to get that free fishing license if you have a disability. R65743 deals with landowner permits and implements the private landowner voucher program and the landowners association program. That was actually from a bill in 2025 that had to be implemented. It essentially mirrors the statute language and puts it in the rule. R65760 deals with aquatic invasive species. The main highlights from that, it implements a new definition of invasive mussel that was created by the legislature this session. It addresses the rules of the Division of Law Enforcement and the Division of Wildlife Resources in aquatic invasive species control. And lastly, it addresses some technical changes to course and education requirements for launching conveyances in Utah water bodies. The last rule is R657-72, which is licensing and operation of outfitters and guides. Justin referenced that one as well. The major change to the rule is just the removal of the term spotters. So again, all very technical in nature, all required by statute that was passed in 2026. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has them.
Questions from the board? Questions from the RAC chairs? Thank you, Stephen. All right, we'll now move on to number 6, our big game informational presentation. This is also informational. We're here from Mike Wardle, the Big Game Program Coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we went through the RACs, especially in the central region, there was a desire for people to understand more about how these permits are allocated. As a reminder, this was presented as an informational because these are permit allocations that were below a 20% change from the previous year. That was set in the statewide plan that those permits automatically happen. But part of that 20% threshold, there was a feeling of people wanting to know more information about how these permits are set. And so in some of the RACs, I took a few minutes and just walked people through the information that our biologists are considering when they set these permit numbers. And I'm happy to do that if the board feels like that's helpful. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, questions from the board?
In the, I believe it was the Northeastern Act, it was mentioned about possibly making it, the information a little more easy to find on each individual unit. We know that the information's there as far as numbers, survivability, everything's there, but it's all in different places. What are your thoughts about possibly finding a way so that the average guy could look at that information and have a better understanding of why the numbers were proposed the way they were?
Sure, yeah. The answer I gave there in the Northeast region is that I think the best solution, honestly, is close connection with our biologists. If folks are concerned about all the data and wanting to look at it all and understand it all, probably the best route is to contact your individual biologist for the unit and go through it with them. A lot of times this information can be daunting when you start looking at success rates, fawn survival, adult doe survival, and without somebody there to help you understand how it all relates. Sometimes I think that it might be just overwhelming and hard to understand. So I think that's probably the best answer, is for folks to visit with the regional staff. The information is online, but like I say, it's kind of tough. You got to dig through PDFs and the annual report. Success rates and stuff are easier to find now on the hunt planner. You can see those for the individual hunts. But yeah, outside of, I don't know that we necessarily want to get to a point where we're in this presentation, we're going through each individual unit and going through all of the data for each unit. That would be a very long presentation for folks to have to sit through.
I agree as far as going over it in every meeting and in every presentation, but if there was a place where they could go and find that without having to have it be presented in every meeting, it could be helpful, and also remove a lot of trust that the public have with their local biologists or, the Division of Wildlife in general.
Sure, yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Mike. You're still there. This next one is our deer permit recommendations for 2026. And this is an action item. We'll have Mike Wardle also present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a reminder, these are the permits that are above that 20% threshold. I want to make it clear to folks that with this 20% rule, when our biologists sat down and set permit numbers, we were really adamant that we did not set permit numbers based on trying to aim above or below that 20% threshold. We really were clear with the biologists and said, look, make the recommendations according to the data. If you're above the 20%, great. If you're below, great. Let's not worry about it, and let's not be trying to aim to get below that 20%. And I just want to make sure that's clear with the public. So.
All right. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the rack chairs?
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I'm
Chris.
not a rack chair.
Go ahead.
It's a little slow on the uptake. So we got a lot of different commentary on these permit increases or decreases. And I see this styled as an action item. And I personally, being new to this and even without newness, have great regard for the, I'll call it the science behind how these recommendations were derived. But are we going to talk about any of the specifics? Or I'm not saying we need to. I was just curious as to what you intended your procedure to be, whether you want a motion for those now, or, I mean, it's Michael is sort of the star of the show on, he wore a lot of hats in these various agenda items. How do you intend to proceed on them?
We have a standard procedure. We go on this where we'll hear questions from us, questions from the RAC chairs. And then the director will summarize public comments. And then we'll have the RAC chairs report on their motions and how it
Okay.
went in their meetings and
That's what,
disposition and.
that sounds good to me. I'd forgotten that
Okay,
standard
Yep,
procedure.
and then we'll do comments from the audience and then towards the end of that, we'll be to a point where we'll make a motion and a vote.
Good, thank you. Sorry for my ignorance.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay, we'll have the director summarize public comments, please.
Yeah, we took 11 comments on this agenda item. Excuse me, sorry, 17 comments. 11 of them, or 65%, somewhat or strongly opposed the permit recommendations. 5 comments, or 30%, somewhat or strongly agreed with the recommendation, and there was one, the neutral. We had a range of comments that ranged from simple disagreed with the number of permits to agreeing with the number of permits, or disagreed for other reasons, such as splitting the Cedar or Stansbury unit.
Okay, thank you, Director. We'll start with the RAC chairs and have you give your report on the motions and then the votes and the discussion that occurred there. We'll start with Brad.
Northern Region, we had one motion that was to accept the deer permit recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Brock.
We had a motion similarly to accept the recommendation as presented, and that motion passed 7-5. We had some members that wanted a few places decreased. We had other members that wanted some places increased, but
Okay.
it passed.
Thank you, Brock. Go ahead.
In the Southern Region, we had one motion to accept as presented, and that passed 7-2 with the opposing votes not liking the 20% automatic adjustment. And we did have comments in our RAC to change permit recommendations, but they were outside of what we could vote on because of the 20% automatic. So it did pass as presented.
All right, thank you. Scoot.
In the Southeastern region, the division's recommendation was passed unanimously as presented.
All right, Eric.
In the Northeastern region, the motion was also passed unanimously to accept the permit numbers as presented.
All right, we have comments from the audience. First is Andy Monroe, and he'll be followed by Kevin Norman.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me be here and address you. My name is Andy Monroe. I'm the president of the Oak Creek Landowners Association. We recently met had our association meeting, and in that meeting, the concerns were brought before us by all of our members that we feel like that we're over harvesting the top end on this unit. Therefore, it's affecting the quality of animals that are being taken. I just want to go over a few numbers. In 2016, when the boundary was changed, that first year, and it took in the private lands at that point, there was 37 total tags that were given between the public tags, landowner tags, and conservation tags. The proposal for this year, 2026, would be 81 tags. The public tags, landowner tags, and conservation tags all included. So these tags have more than doubled in that time frame. Also in that time frame, I talked to our biologist just a couple days ago. The estimated population in 2016 was 1,400. Right now, the estimated population is 1,000. So our tags have more than doubled in the same time that the population has gone down on our unit. We just feel like there's too many tags being issued, and if we can continue to do this, it will greatly affect the quality of bucks that are being taken. We respectfully ask that you would consider holding off on increasing the tags on the Oak Creek until next year when the mule deer mid-plan review takes place. and at that point, address this and hopefully get it put into premium status. If it was in premium status, we wouldn't have had these tag increases for the last several years. And we feel that like that would be a good move. And I just appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Kevin?
Andy's more brave than me. I don't like the podium. I'll come over here. Kevin Norman representing SFW. We have our fulfillment committee meeting, how we form our position as an organization. We bring all our chapter chairs together and they form our position by voting on different topics. So with that being said, we support the division's recommendations with one exception. We had some concern on the Monroe with the fire. And the numbers there, what's going on. So it was voted on that our recommendation would be to hold those permits to 900 on that unit to see what this rehab and the fire does there. With that being said, personally, man, this seems like a success story with this increase. You know, we used to be at 230 something thousand tags and we're a third of that. And so these increases in permits does my heart good. We all just want to hunt, and it's funny to see the internet warriors being so upset about increases. I guess they don't like to hunt, but I get to work closely with many biologists, and I guess I put a lot of trust in them and see what they do and understand what they do, and super grateful for their work and I'm grateful for the 20% non-negotiable. I think that allows them to do their job and do it well. And so thank you for your guys' time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. Mike, do you have anything you want to add in at this time? Not necessary, but.
Yeah, not necessarily unless there's questions that are helpful as you discuss.
All right. So for the deer permits, Northern region, Southeastern passed unanimously. The Central, the Southern, and Northeastern all passed it, but it was 7-5, 7-2, and 7-1. So it passed all of the regions. So bring it back to the board for discussion.
I guess maybe we should have discussion on the Oak Creek. Mike, do you have the numbers handy for the average days of harvest on that unit and hunter satisfaction?
Yeah, so you want to know how many days folks were hunting on average on the Oak Creek?
That's correct. The average days they hunted.
It varies year to year. So on average, you're probably, let's see, average over the last 15 years has been about 7.7 days. So about a week. And that's across all the hunts, including the archery.
Okay, thank you. What feedback do you have from public hunters on that? Their happiness with or without what their satisfaction is with that hunt?
Yeah, so for context, for those that don't know, before being the big game coordinator, I was the biologist over the unit on the Oak Creek, and what Andy's talked about is similar to what we've heard in response from hunters. We've heard feedback that there's not as many giant bucks, 190 plus deer, as there were, say, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, and I think as hunters, we like to latch on to permits being the cause of all things in wildlife. And I think it's actually a lot more complex than that on the Oak Creek. The Oak Creek had a big fire in 2012, significantly changed that mountain, and the summer range was improved significantly. There was a lot more high nutrient feed in the summer range. On the winter range, the fire nuked the winter range and took out a lot of the shrubs and things that we like to have for deer. And so the deer were forced to go into alfalfa fields even more. But that change in nutrition really caused our deer herd to increase. And we saw a lot more of those giant bucks on the mountain, those 190 plus. And in order to have, those giant bucks, what makes a giant buck is age, nutrition, and genetics play a small role also. But I think nutrition is probably one of the biggest drivers of whether a deer is going to be a giant. And for a lot of years, we had fantastic nutrition because of that fire. But the benefits of the fire eventually age out, right? We saw the same thing on the Henrys. If you look at the Henrys, I think this is a similar story to what happened on the Henrys, where we had a big fire. A few years after, we had a lot of really high quality bucks taken on the unit. And then even when we don't increase permits, we still saw a decline in the number of giant quality bucks that were taken on the unit. And so I think that's really probably more what's driving the changes on the Oak Creek. That's not to say that there's not still giant bucks. There's still a lot of really big deer on the Oak Creek, but it's just different than when it was 6 or 7 years ago. And I think a lot of that is more explained by the habitat than anything else.
Thanks, Mike. So we're still within line with the buck to doe ratio though, with the permit numbers. The way
Yeah.
it sits, we're good.
Yeah, it's actually above the buck-doe ratio objective for a limited entry unit and has been. That's why those increases have taken place. When the deer plan was revised a couple years ago, the committee actually discussed at length the Oak Creek and discussed that option of making it a premium limited entry unit, which would have increased the objective. At that time, the committee didn't feel like they wanted to do that. A lot of that was, the sentiment was that with the Oak Creek being a resource limited unit, they didn't want to carry those higher buck-doe ratios and have that impact fawn production and herd productivity. So that was, it wasn't voted to become premium at that time. Having said that, when we do the mid-plan review, I think that's definitely something we can discuss about, look at it again with the committee.
Mike,
Go ahead.
maybe it's a question or maybe just further explanation. Brock, feel free to, I know this is part of your study too, but the nutrition of the mother at the time of birth, actually, I've heard plays a big effect on antler size. Have you heard similar things on that as well?
Yeah, I think we, for a buck to be like 220, 230, they have to have a surplus of quality feed available to them their entire life. And like you mentioned, even before their life, it matters, right? Fat moms give births to big fawns, and skinny moms aren't going to create a 220 buck. If there's a 220, 230 buck on the landscape, it's just his mom was probably in really good shape when she was carrying that baby. And so that nutrition, it's a generational effect. But as, like I say, as that benefit starts to go away, as we get further away from when that fire was, we're going to see changes in antler size.
So I want to dig further, sorry.
Good.
They have genetics, right? That's part of their DNA. Does that mean then that their full potential is not met if the nutrition is not there? And what's the correlation between, is it genetics or is it nutrition?
Sure, yeah.
You know that. Sorry, this is asking a lot.
No, that's good questions. I think genetics do play a role. I think genetics play more of a role in antler shape. Like you'll see bucks year to year that have weird characteristics, right? I think that's more of a genetic function. Obviously, there's some level. I don't think we fully understand what level genetics are playing a role in antler size. But it's just like people, right? Like I can have the best nutrition available and I'm never going to look like Karl Malone, right? But so it does play a role at some level, but I don't think it's as important as age. They've got to be mature, right? They've got to have so many years of life. And I think nutrition plays a bigger role than genetics.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Chris.
I think if you bulked up, you might be John Stockton. But,
Maybe. My shorts would have to shorten a little bit too.
but fast. How do you reconcile, was it Mr. Monroe's comments about a few years ago, the herd was 1,400, and now it's 1,100, and we're going from 1,000, then we're going from 37 to 81. And is it all just explained by the buck to doe ratios are healthy and the harvest quality has been high and we can do that with fewer does,
Yeah.
fewer total deer?
Yeah, I think, this is a question that comes up not just on the Oak Creek, but across the whole state of Utah of when we're wanting to grow deer populations, how are we still able to even hunt bucks, right? If the goal is to have more deer on the landscape, why are we still hunting bucks? So at the root of it, it comes back to that bucks aren't as big of a deal in a population, right? That it's the does and the fawns that really matter. We're able to harvest bucks because no matter if we harvest 20 bucks or 50 bucks off of a unit, as long as all the does are being covered during the breeding season, that next summer, the same amount of fawns will hit the ground, right? We're going to have the same input year after year as long as we're getting good pregnancy rates on the does. That's why we're able to hunt bucks. The Oak Creek specifically, that's the explanation for it, is we have plenty of bucks in that population. And where the Oak Creek is a resource limited area where there's not a ton of feed to go around, actually carrying more bucks on the landscape can decrease that herd productivity, which I think helps explain why the population has dropped. If we want that herd to grow, we're actually better off probably to carry fewer bucks in the population.
Any other comments? Oh, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, a good thing is that we've had a real mild winter, and we probably expect in about 6 weeks or 5 weeks have a bunch of fawns hit the ground, right? So we're hoping that this will continue a trend from the tough winter that we had in 22, 23. When I was on the rack, which has been a decade ago or more, we used to talk about three things, and I'm not sure that we still discuss that, but it was like a three-legged stool: biological, fiscal, and social, in terms of approaching a lot of these things that we discuss. Mule deer is a big topic in our state, obviously, and a lot of people express their concerns. I'm going to talk about the last two because you guys cover biological really good, but I guess my question is, or comment is, the fiscal side of it, the public, and I'm going to go back to what Justin said earlier, is that I think we need to have on more information out there with the public, because the feedback that I get constantly is you're increasing all of these tags to make more money. And that's a misconception in terms of like why we're adding tags. We kind of know that. Yeah. The other one is the social component, which is great. We have a mechanism in place, which is our 5 regions, our advisory councils to have input. But I think we need to pay attention to what the public is saying out there. And I think you saw this in some of the voting on some of these deer numbers, that this is, they all passed, but they weren't all unanimous. And I think there's a lot of people out there that really feel that more information is needed. Me and you had a discussion recently, and it made more sense to me once we had that discussion. Most people don't have that opportunity. So I think outlining something that will, and maybe it's an example unit that you go through and identify, because Andy's comments didn't make sense to me with what we talked about until you kind of brought it up. Now we can have a discussion later about the Oak Creeks on, how do you split the pie up to get more quality bucks, but maybe that comes next year with the management plan that's going to come in place, correct? They'll be reviewed. And that's probably the proper place to do that, which I would encourage to have some feedback on that. But I would really encourage us try to get something out there with more information as to how do we come up with these numbers and where do they go. There was a comment made too. I'm excited to see that there is more opportunity and there is, with some increased tags, that's a good thing. But a lot of people don't get that. They don't understand, other than they just feel like it's licenses and we need to do that back. So we make sure we kind of cover that social aspect of it, of having more information. Thanks for all the work that you guys do. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Bob?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo that as well, informational. Also, when when you look at some of the units, the increases and, there's a couple of units that, if you look at it, it's a pretty substantial increase. And, but then when you look at the trend of the buck doe ratios, then it's, you can understand why the increase. And, had the buck doe ratio set in the deer plan and in the mule deer statewide plan, and to try to manage to those buck doe ratios. But I do understand the sentiment with the increase and on some of those units, and Oak Creek included. And guess echo what Ryan said. Maybe the place to bring that up with the buck doe ratios there on the Oak Creeks would be in the mule deer plan coming forward in the next year or two. So,
Mr. Chair, could I add something real quick?
Yes.
I was just gonna, internally, we've had a lot of discussion after the racks about what's the best avenue to help educate the public on this type of information? Because it can be a lot of information. And it's hard to know when you're doing these PowerPoints and these presentations, like how much should I include? Is somebody going to watch a 45-minute YouTube clip of my head talking about deer? And so I tend to try and simplify. But I think that you're right. There's an appetite for more information, more education. And so we've talked about in the future potentially doing like an informational item on a rack tour and with the wildlife board where we take the public through a recommendation and talk more about the population model and predicting buck doe ratios into the future. And so just so I think that we feel that same thing and we are kind of thinking about doing that in the future.
You and I talked about this quite a bit too, about how to present that to the public to where it's not too confusing. And I watched in Central Region what happened when the biologist on the West Wasatch got up and said, well, all of the fawns survived. We've had 2 easy winters. Population has grown dramatically. That's the reason we increased the time. People go, oh, okay. I mean, I don't think they need the nitty gritty, just a good general statement, and to have that somewhere about each of the changes in tag requirements. I mean, I don't think you need to get right down to the specs, but just a good general. I think most people would that'd be good for them. Then if you guys want to dig deeper and you showed me that model, that would work, and they could use that and apply it to any unit. But I think most of them a good general overview of why the numbers are changing, it would suffice. That way they don't have to count on what did Kevin call the internet guys? Internet warriors on their technical advice. And I think that would work. I think that, I think that'd be a great idea. Just make it this more palatable to the general public if they had an appetite to look. And then if they wanted to dig deep, they could. So.
Can I make just one suggestion along with that? I think it'd be great if we had something that we could copy and paste, somebody could click, and when we answer some of the questions that come through the board or through the racks, to copy and paste that kind of an example or thing that could go back, and it's right at their finger. It has to kind of be in layman's terms, but a breakdown of that to how you arrive at those increases would be great. But I think it'd be beneficial for us. So I don't have to sit. I'll speak for myself. I don't have to sit, and I'd hate to misrepresent the facts or the data. So it would be good, I think, if we had something at our fingertips to be able to share with the public as these questions come for all of us, actually. So just a suggestion.
I think that chart you produced would work really well for that you showed me the other day. So,
Chair, I'd like just to address the Oak Creek a little bit more, having had a chance to talk with a few of the stakeholders or those who are down there, and I respect them, and I don't believe that they are questioning the biology or why the tag permits have been increased, but I do respect their request to look at having it be a premium unit. I mean, one of the things that we deal with most as Wildlife Board and as RAC members is that opportunity, versus quality. And we have a few premium units in the state, and there's a lot of desire to hunt those, and we're still giving opportunity in other places. And I think it's something that we could entertain. Ultimately, in order to have that quality, we're trying to let the age of, our bucks let those bucks grow to be a little older. And I think that's exactly what the Oak Creek LOA is requesting. And I think there's also been quite a few others who've spent time on the mountain that are requesting that. And I'm all about opportunity, but I think it's fair to discuss that a little bit too. I know it went through the mule deer committee once, and I hope as they revisit it that they will consider that, and consider that maybe we have one more premium unit in the state. And I think by doing that, we're still have a lot of places with opportunity, but I think we should think about giving some opportunity, for them to have older age class bucks like what the LOA is requesting. And so I think the numbers are where they're at right now, considering the plan and the type of unit it is, but I do like the idea of revisiting that. I'm hoping that's something that the mule deer will revisit. Is that a request that we can make, like an action item, or is that something that they'll bring?
What if we made it an action item to just request to put, looking at the Oak Creek unit as a premium unit on the mid-plan review? Could that be on the agenda?
For sure, yeah.
And I know the divisions, the one thing I've noticed, people, when I started wearing this brown coat, they said, you've gone to the dark side. And I go, well, no, but I'm starting to understand well enough to know that the decisions aren't half-baked, that there's been boots on the ground, and they've got really good data to help sponsor these ideas and these policies. And so most of the time they're spectacularly good ideas, and I'm 100% with it. But anyway, I think, would it be possible, is there an appetite for putting that, asking to put that on the agenda for the mule deer mid-plan review within the board? And make that as a motion?
I'm definitely for it.
Okay. Can I make a motion? I make a motion that we add that just as an agenda item on the mid-plan review to look at the Oak Creeks as a premium unit.
I'll second that.
Okay, Chris is second. Any discussion on the motion?
Just a little bit. I just want to make sure when they do review this, that it doesn't cause any detriment to the mamas. That's where my main focus is. As long as it's not going to hurt mamas and babies, then I think it'd be a great thing. But I'm okay putting it on and discussing, but if it's going to hurt population, then that should also be taken into consideration.
And I think it will be as the division reviews it. Okay.
And that's why I trust them. I know that they're going to look at the data, and the information they come back with will be sound. So I do appreciate their due diligence on a lot of those things.
All right. We'll vote to put it on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm not opposed to having the conversation. I think it's a conversation worth having. But if I were to vote on it right now, if we were voting to make it happen, I would say absolutely not.
Okay.
But I will support the conversation at this point.
Okay, which is all we're talking about. So, all right. Ready for a vote? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right. Now we'll talk about the motion that's on the table. Any more discussion on the motion or the conditions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to accept the remainder of the division's recommendations as presented.
Okay, motion made by Kent.
I'll second.
Seconded by Bob to accept as presented. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mike. All right, we'll now hear agenda item number 8, our once-in-a-lifetime permit recommendations. And this is an action item, and we'll have Rusty Robinson, our once-in-a-lifetime species coordinator, present it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything further to add. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I was going to ask you if we had any, we talked quite a bit about moose over the course of the RAC meetings, both the antlerless as well as just the moose themselves. Do we have any further data on moose numbers and mortality and stuff like that? I know the winter tick thing was a big concern.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'll come up during the antlerless portion, but I'm happy to talk about it now as well. With regards to the Wasatch West cow moose hunt, that topic came up at several of the racks, and there was some concern expressed for that population with winter tick loss, and we echo the same concerns. I think if having the data we have now, knowing what we know now, we probably would have recommended fewer permits on that hunt. The original recommendation was for 5 permits, but I think the division would be comfortable dropping that down significantly lower to 1, or even putting a pause on that hunt for this year. And so whatever the board wants to decide to do there. We tallied up some numbers, all the mortalities we've documented, and it seems to be pretty specific to the Wasatch. There's some other losses in the northern region, primarily on the Ogden, but not anywhere near the Wasatch. We had about 56 moose collars on the Wasatch West and the eastern part of that unit as well. If you're just looking in the central region, there were about 36 moose collars, and we've lost about 5 of those. So probably about 15% mortality on adult cows is what we're looking at, near as we can tell. So it's not the end of the world. It's not unprecedented. Probably the bigger issue is we've lost quite a few calves, and so we'll have probably a year without a lot of recruitment, which again is not the end of the world, but if you start stacking those years, multiple years, then you can really see a big dip in that population. So there are some concerns, and we'd be happy when we get to the antlers portion to reduce those permits down.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Do you feel like it's at a point where it's detrimental to the bull numbers? Are we okay with our bull recommendations with the
Yeah, we're just
conditions?
not seeing a lot of bull mortality for whatever reason. So we think we're okay. And I think the worst of it is behind us. There's some seasonality to it. So as those ticks going into summer now, they'll drop off, and those moose will be able to get some reprieve during the summer. And hopefully we can get some snow this fall that keeps those ticks laying on the ground and give the moose another break during the winter. And we'll be, I think, right back to where we were. But yeah, we're just not seeing the loss in bulls. And if we do, I think it'll reflect in the age and the harvest next year, and we can adjust then if we need to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs? Okay, we'll have the director summarize the public comments.
Yes, thank you. We had 10 submissions on this agenda item. 50% are somewhat or strongly agreed with permit recommendations. 40% strongly disagreed, and 1 was neutral. Our comments range from the number of permits to disagreeing with once in a lifetime and how they are used with non-residents and how they can apply for all of them.
Yes, I hear that a lot too. I think it's sure all of us do. All right, rack chairs will have reports on the motions and the votes, and then the discussion surrounding them. We'll start over with Brad.
In the northern region, we had 1 motion to accept the permit recommendations as presented, with the exception of adding 1 archery permit for bison to both the Book Cliffs Little Creek and Bitter Creek archery hunts. That passed 9-1. The one opposing was not in favor of taking opportunity away from any weapon hunts and moving it to the archery since the success was so high.
Thanks, Brad. Brock?
Yes, the Central Region had one motion to approve the recommendation as presented with the addition of one extra archery tag for bison on the Book Cliffs, and that motion passed unanimously.
Okay. Austin?
The Southern Region just had one motion to accept as presented, and it passed unanimously.
Scoot?
In the Southeastern region, we had one motion to recommend as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Eric?
Northeastern region, we did talk about the Book Cliffs and archery, like supportive of that, but the motion was made just to pass the permit numbers as presented, and that was passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Have any comment cards on that? Okay, we'll first hear our public comments. We'll have Kevin Albrecht and then Troy Justison.
Board, good to address you. I would like to address, I think through the RAC process, it had been brought up to increase the number of archery permits. And I'd like to give a little history of kind of how those came to play. Those originally, when they come through the Wildlife Board process, it was a 3-year process to approve that. And the reason why is because through the point system, originally there was no tags. And so, many of the public felt like they were taking tags from a point holder was at 28, 29, 30 points. And now we're going to say that archery is more important. So it took quite a process. And for that originally to happen, that went back to the racks, and the promise was made to the public that, hey, it's okay if these tags are harder, if they're at a later date, if they're not the premier tag, it's okay if they're a harder success rate. It doesn't have to be the 100% success rate. And so it did not pass the board twice. The third year, there was a survey done. And that's what was stated to the public, that it would not have the exact same dates as what was given during the draw. It would have harder dates. It would be a tougher hunt. And with that, it passed. I'm going off my recollection, but I believe it passed the racks 3-2. And with that, it did pass the board. So I just share that with you that now I believe some of those, as board members have changed, as members of the DWR have changed, that a lot of those dates have changed from when they were the harder hunts. And now they're given some of the first seasons to hunt. And we see some of those success rates now going to 100%. And I think that it's going back to what the fear of the public had is, hey, are we saying that the archery hunter is more important than the guy that had waited the 30 years? And I would just share my standpoint that I feel like that we ought to go back to the original intent. What we told the public we would do is that it's okay if that's a harder hunt, that it's not the 100% guaranteed success rates. So I'd ask the board to consider that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Troy?
Troy Justison, Sportsman, Fish and Wildlife. I didn't get the memo to get the haircut. You guys are all clean cut and ready to go. Looking good there, Rusty.
No, I wanted to say to the board, I appreciate the questions, the comments. It's a learning process, and I appreciate the dialogue going back and forth. I know in the interest of time, we've cut down on hearing the presentation at all the racks and the boards, but quite honestly, I kind of miss that because you learn each thing as things are discussed and talked about. So I want to commend the board by having that discussion and not just rubber stamping and going through. Now to my comments, Sports Fish and Wildlife supports the division recommendations on once in a lifetime. and along with Utah Bowmen's Association recommendation to increase the archery permit there. But I want to speak specifically to what Kevin talked about. As the individual that took that through the racks 3 times and got my teeth kicked in by a former boss, being Byron Bateman, who I love directly, immensely, Kevin's exactly right. This was an opportunity hunt. And that's the only way we agreed to that we would have tougher times, shorter seasons, whatever, and we knew success rate would be low. I don't want to see this opportunity go away. So I'd encourage the division to look at that and adjust those back so we keep that. So that it's important. You know, that was what was agreed to as we took it through the rack process. That's why the board eventually agreed to allow us to go through with this. So I'd encourage the division to look at that and change those dates back to that and keep it at that, an opportunity. If you're man enough and tough enough to get it done, get out there and get it done. So thank you.
Thanks, Troy. Now hear from Travis Jensen.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Travis Jensen. I'm president of the Utah Wild Sheep Foundation. We're here to express our support for the division and their once-in-a-lifetime permit recommendations, and also specifically the bighorn sheep, both Rocky and Desert permit recommendations that are being put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, quick summary of the RAC motions. Northern Region, they accepted it 9-1, and they added that 1 tag to the Little Creek. Central Region, it passed unanimously with the addition of that 1 extra archery tag. Then the Southern Region, Southeastern, Northeastern, it passed unanimously.
One correction. Our motion was to add 1 permit to both Bitter Creek and Little Creek.
Okay, to both of them. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. I remember the buffalo discussion from back in the day, and the archery and the opportunity and the whole idea and the way the bow hunters at the time sold it was marginal success. You know, and I see that where they have it first on the book cliffs, that it's 100% success. And so I'm not sure, based on the original inception of what that hunt was for, whether that's adding more tags to it's a good plan or not. I mean, if we've got more buffalo that we need to harvest, because it's a for sure harvest, if you add it to that, then maybe it ought to be with the big pool where almost everybody's trying to get a tag. But that's my opinion. Okay, so we're back to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to kind of echo what you said, and I was on the rack, and I was actually the vice chair the final time it went through and got passed. And I remember the discussion pretty well, and I agree with Kevin and with you, Mr. Chairman. I think the original plan with that and what it was intended for was a way to help people that wanted to hunt hard. Okay, it's going to be easier to draw an archery tag because you're talking about 15% of the hunters are going to apply for an archery tag. And it's become, like on the book cliffs, it's become 100% hunt. They get first crack at the bison. They're not stirred up yet. And it makes it easy, and that's not the spirit of what that hunt was intended for in the first place. So I agree with you. I think if the division feels comfortable adding more tags than what the recommendation is, then we could probably do that. But those tags do need to be in any legal weapon pool.
I just probably have a question as far as the dates. What's changed since it was first voted in and approved? What were the dates then and what are they now? I'm sorry, I don't know those off the top of my head.
Well, the archery hunt, as I recall, and this is just going on memory, used to be last, right?
I couldn't tell you the
I know it was
history
on
on
the
the book
Henrys.
cliffs. I know the Henrys, it was early and it's been moved to late January now that's kind of captured that sentiment of being very difficult. I don't know if anyone's here from the Northeastern region that remembers sorry, Dallin, you almost got away with not getting up here.
I'm Dallin Christensen. I'm the Northeast Region Wildlife Manager. So the question was, what's changed with the archery dates for bison in the book list? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think they have always been first ever since we put them into place. They've always been the first hunt, kind of coinciding with the archery elk hunt and archery deer hunt. So nothing as far as the dates have changed. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm not understanding it. Is that not accurate information we were given that the dates have changed then?
We may
Seems
be
like
talking
last-
apples and oranges because it did change
Yeah.
on the Henrys, but, and I just got confirmation from the biologist. It's always been first on the book cliffs.
Okay, but first, I mean, how long we've been hunting buffaloes with bows on the book cliffs? Not very long.
No, not very long.
Like
Few-
1 year,
a
2
few-
years?
A few years.
Two,
Two or
probably.
three, that sound right?
Okay.
Maybe a little longer. I know if we started at the same time as the sheep and goat, it's been at least 3, something like that. 4 or 5. Sorry, I'm not giving you
Years run
clear
together, don't
answers.
they? Okay,
But fairly recent.
all right, all right.
And then another question that I have as far as if the information on the number of, like, how many points, what the max point holders that have been drawing those archery permits. Are we having people with less points, or are we still having max point holders apply for these archery permits?
I could pull up the point drawing.
The
unless
reason
none of
I'm
you have
just
them
curious if we are switching or if we are giving people an opportunity with lower points, or if it's still high point holders that are still applying for those.
handy. Yeah, that's a good question.
Ryan, we're waiting for him.
Do we wait for him?
That would be courteous.
Yes, it would.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Austin probably has those numbers on his head. He's
He
a
probably
walking
does.
encyclopedia when it comes to this.
Yeah. Comes the official word. Of course, they just changed the website like yesterday, so it's in a different place. You got it, Andy? Oh, thanks, Lindy.
The new website takes a little bit longer to find. So it took me, yeah. So when you're looking at the Bitter Creek archery hunt, last year, we had people apply that drew out in the max point round with 24 points. That was the highest. And then on the Little Creek, sorry, I have to find the hunt number. The highest was 25 bonus points for that max point. So,
Thanks, Lindy.
yeah. 5 each. So 3 permits went to the max point round and 2 went to the random.
And with the rifle permits on those same,
Permits or max points?
both, I guess. So 38 total permits.
It varies. It goes, there's some units. You've got like the cow only ones are definitely lower. So when you look at those ones, it's like 19 was the max point. And then when you get into the hunter's choice, you're looking at 26. So it's pretty similar when you look at the hunter's choice of people applying for those tags.
Thank you. So I guess my comment would be is, and we're not really taking, it almost feels like the people are just choosing to hunt archery over rifle, but we're not really skipping anyone ahead, is what it appears to me, just a comment. They're just choosing that weapon choice and doing something differently.
Justin, thank you for asking that question, because that makes a big difference knowing that this hunt came about probably after discussion about the intent of making archery hard. I'm an advocate I love archery, and I want to support that wherever I can, as long as it's fair and equal. And to me, it looks like it's still fair and equal. It's high point holders going by these archery tags. If they want to hunt archery, great. It'll be interesting to look into it further. I don't know, that I came in here thinking with the intent that, no, we should keep this as it, the intent was supposed to be, but it sounds like this one came after that discussion. Board approved it after, from what I'm understanding, after the discussion about keeping these an opportunity hunt. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to ponder this one a little.
Brian.
Yeah, just a comment. I think Kevin's point was well thought out, but it sounds to me like the first hunt, probably the August hunt on the book cliffs came through the racks and got approved after that, right? After the original, they were supposed to be the late hunts and whatever. So to me, that went through the process. The public said that would be okay. Personally, I'm a bow hunter. I would much rather, and if you go down on the Henrys in January to hunt bison after everybody's had a shot at them for 3, man, you're a stud to go do that and then get so I kind of applaud that, but I agree with what Paula said and what Justin said. I don't want to be discriminated against because I flip a stick, and I don't think that's the intent. I'm just saying that, I think we want to have opportunity with all weapons if we can. And I think that's a good thing. So thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Chair, could I add one
Yes,
thing?
go
Just if
ahead.
it helps the conversation. It looks like the first, when that hunt was initiated, the first year was 2020. And so we just completed our 5th year of that.
Mr. Chair,
Like that.
Go ahead,
I-
Chris.
as usual, I'm not following exactly, but the proposal that went before the racks did not have the extra archery tag at Little Creek. Is that correct?
The division's proposal did not have the extra archery tag.
And so, and that would take it from 5 to 6. And so and then there's this comment that was in the director's summary of the comments about a hunter with more than 25 points, age 85. That's an ambitious fellow or feller at that. This probably isn't the format for deciding whether we're going to change that rule, but I was curious as to how a recommendation like that might be addressed. But it seems to me, not knowing a lot about it, and having heard what we have, I'd probably be in favor of accepting the recommendation, but adding that extra archery tag.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I guess that the archery, it's 100% success. I think the rifle, any weapon was actually a lower success. I can't remember what it was. It was 80-something%. Is that right, Rusty?
Yeah, that sounds right. And there's several hunts, but I remember one of them was in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess with the division's proposal, with increase in I think there was increased permits on the rifle, but not on the archery. And I don't know. I'd be more inclined to go along with the division's proposal on this, because the archery is 100% success. And if we were going to add another permit, I guess I'd be inclined to add it again to another one to any legal weapon where majority of people are putting in, would be That's kind of where my thoughts are on it.
Any other discussion? Or are we ready for a motion?
I guess just the last comment, I like when Ryan mentioned that, or he said he didn't want to be discriminated because he flipped a stick, is his words. I agree with that. And I also don't think that we are giving favor to those because they choose to use archery as well. This is just giving it another opportunity. The rifle permits were increased as well. And yes, we have had 100% success rate. It's hard to know who those hunters are that drew it. We may have had some we've had some efficient guys draw that. If I drew it, I probably wouldn't be 100%. But I like the idea. So I guess I would be in favor of that increase on the rifle. I would also be in favor of increasing these 2 archery permits. Knowing that the point total, we're really not letting anyone get ahead of it. So
Do you want to make that in the
I
form of a
do.
motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the division's proposal with an exception of adding 2 archery permits, one on the Bitter Creek and one on the, what is the name of it? The
Little Creek.
the what? Little Creek, sorry. Yes.
Okay, motion by Justin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Paula, and that's to accept the division's proposal with the addition of an additional archery tag on both the Bitter Creek and Little Creek. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-1. It's 5-1. 2. Oh, all right. Okay, thank you. 4-2. My apologies. All right. We'll now move on to action item number 9, the Bull Elk recommendations for 2026. That'll be Mike Wardle, our big game coordinator.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to add, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Does anyone want to bring up the question about Nebo? We've had quite a few comments about the tag increase on the Nebo.
You bet. Dave Smedley's here. You want to talk about it, Dave? You want me to? Dave wants to come on up. This is something that came up in each rack, and I'll let Dave talk about it. But we're above the age objective consistently over the last 7 years. Had a big fire on the unit. Our biologist did a big flight there and saw a lot of bulls. But I'll let Dave talk.
David Smedley, the Central Region Wildlife Manager. So just give you some history here. Like some of the concerns that came up were back in like 2010, we had a lot of tags. But there's a big difference between the number of tags we had there and the population size. So things have changed, and we're concerned that we're going to increase too many tags and we're going to lose that age on the elk. In the last 5 years, so in 2020, we changed the elk objective, the age objective. It was 6.5 to 7. We lowered that to 5.5. And since that change, our average age has been 7. 4 out of the last 5 years were all higher than 7. We've been slowly increasing permits. So we made a larger increase this year. Let me pull up the permit numbers here real quick and what we were. So I was just so we've been making increases over the last several years. We made like a 13% increase, 15% increase, 31% increase, and we stayed the same. And then we made a 19% increase, and that age is still staying high. And so in this last flight, we just flew it this year, we counted 2,400 animals. And that's physically counted. So our estimate is around 2,750. We're over the objective on that unit, which was changed to 2,200. So we're over objective. Elk have been growing. With that number, we counted 381 bulls. So with siteability, we're somewhere between 500 and 600 bulls. And then we got calves coming in too. So we're going to have plenty of bulls on the unit. Our bull to cow ratio has been increasing. And then the other concern was where we were at when we had those numbers. And we were only at 1,100 elk. So we've more than doubled the number of elk. And so we've been increasing. That age isn't coming down. I think we feel really good about the recommendation with what we've done. I know it's a big increase, but it's, we keep coming up. And so we, rather than chase it slow, we're trying to make that bigger jump. And then what Mike said too, we did have a fire in there that's been really beneficial to that elk herd. So.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs? Brad?
I have one question. I'll try and make this make sense. So we don't run bull to cow ratio objectives in the plan. We run age objectives, correct?
Correct.
I think I'll just say it. When you look at the way we handle trying to meet the plan objectives on elk compared to how, I'll use the word aggressive we are, trying to meet plan objectives on every other species, it seems like we're pretty slow to go after our age objectives on elk. You see a 5 permit increase here, 10 there, but on deer, seems like we're pretty aggressive to meet the buck to doe ratio. Same thing with pronghorn once in a lifetime. Is that just a perception? What's your take on that?
No, I think that's a great question. I think, so yeah, in a perfect world, as a biologist, if you were going to make a recommendation, you want to understand your herd demographics, your survival, you understand harvest, you want to know survival from the time they're 0 to 6 months old, from 6 months old to a year and a half. We're there with deer. Candidly, we're not there with elk. Elk are a much more difficult species to model. Pregnancy rates can vary year to year. There's just a lot tougher to get information on. Bull cow ratio, for example, we've tried to get bull cow ratios from our preseason elk classification. It's difficult because elk are sexually segregated during the months of July and August. And so you see a lot of cows, you see these big nursery groups, and then you see spots of bulls in small groups. It's not as representative of a sample as compared to mule deer when we do it during the rut, and they're not sexually segregated. With elk, it's tough to do it during the rut. They're up in the trees. The bull cow ratio is just a really hard metric to obtain. So I think that in general, we're probably more conservative when we're managing based on age in our changes, simply because we don't have that level of detailed data like we do with deer. So with deer, we're definitely a lot more comfortable being aggressive in our changes because we have the data to back those up.
I know the guys that spoke to me about it. Their concern was that we were 5 or 6 in this unit, 8 or 9 in this unit, and then 30 on Nebo. And that was just the difference in the amount of the increase, and that was the part that they were having a hard time with. And the numbers justify it. The flight numbers and the bulls numbers, and also if you keep increasing tags and the age of harvest stays about the same, then you got excess bulls. So
yep. Yeah, and along with that, like those flights matter. Flights are hard, especially when we have light winters, we don't have conditions, and we don't get flights. It can change a biologist's perceptions really, really quick when they get in the air. And like Wes counted 380 bulls, and it can change their perception and their willingness to be more aggressive.
any other questions from the board? Any others from the rack chairs? Okay, we'll have the director summarize the public comments, please.
Yeah, we had 11 submissions on this agenda item. 6 of them somewhat or strongly disagreed with the division, and 5 of the comments somewhat or strongly agreed with the proposal. The bulk of the comments had to do with what we were talking about, or addressing how many spike permits that we give out, or general season any bull permits that we give out. So
Thank you. RAC chairs will report on the motions and the votes and the discussion at RACs. Brad.
Okay, Northern Region, we had one motion to accept the permit recommendations as presented, with the exception of adding 5 bull elk permits to each of the late season limited entry archery hunts, and that passed unanimously.
Brock.
Yeah, we had a motion to approve the recommendation as presented, and that motion passed 10 in favor, 2 opposed. Comment, one was the Nebo, and then one was, why don't we be more aggressive on other units?
In the Southern Region, we had one motion to accept as presented, and that passed 8-1, with the one opposing vote wanting to see a lesser increase on the Nebo.
Thanks, Austin. Scoot.
Yeah, there was one motion to recommend as presented and pass unanimously. There was some discussion, quite a bit of discussion actually, about some of these units where tag numbers are low enough to where non-residents, there may only be 1 or 0 non-resident tags, which doesn't allow for bonus permits. And so taking a look into that, similarly to how it's done with once in a lifetime permits.
Okay.
That was a discussion that wasn't necessarily, didn't come through as part of the motion.
All right. Thank you. Brad, not Brad, sorry.
For Northeastern region, I can go real fast. The motion was made to accept the permit numbers as presented with an additional 5 late archery tags per unit. And that was passed unanimously. And we also had kind of a discussion on that about some overlap that could be with the rifle antlerless, but also, I guess on a positive note, the majority of the people I've talked to and others have enjoyed that private lands bull tag too. So that was something discussed.
Thank you. We have one public comment card. We'll call Troy Justensen up.
Can you hear me? Troy Justensen, Sportsman, Fish and Wildlife. We support the division's recommendation with one exception, and it is the Nebo. Our Nebo chapter was concerned with the big jump in permit numbers. They fully understand it. It falls within the plan recommendations, but they would like to see the permits remain at last year's numbers there. Just real quick, I want to thank Mike Wardle. He did an outstanding job through RACs. Congratulations on your new job. So we're excited to have you there, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, to summarize the RAC motions, the Northern Region, they accept the division proposal as presented, and they wanted to add 5 additional tags on each of the late archery hunts. Central Region, accept the bull elk recommendations as presented, and that passed 10-2. Southern Region, accept the recommendations, passed 8-1. In the Southeastern Region, it passed unanimously. The Northeastern Region, they passed as presented, and then the addition of the 5 additional late tags, and that went 6 in favor and 2 opposed. We'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
Mike? Pardon me. What's the division stand on adding 5 more tags to those late archery hunts?
Yeah, I've called and talked to some of our biologists about that and haven't really found a lot of concern. Success rates have been pretty low on that. We've been about 20% statewide. Some units it's 0%. Some of the higher units it's been 50 to 60%. But the impact biologically has been pretty low on those late archery tags.
Okay, so thank you for that. Mr. Chair, I think that proposal out of the RACs, I think it's a good one. I like the idea of doing that and provide more opportunity for people that want to go out, and it's double tough. I'm pretty sure the LaSalle's is the one that's 0. I've talked to people that's had that tag, and I haven't talked to anybody that's killed a bull yet, but they have fun and they've seen bulls, just haven't been able to make it happen. So I'm in favor of doing that. Any other thoughts, Justin?
I agree. I like the idea. I think it's given opportunity. It doesn't have a biological effect, and it's again giving someone an opportunity to get out there and hunt.
And then one more comment, Mr. Chair, on the NEBO, the discussion on that. I understand where people are coming from with the big permit jump in 1 year, but it's the argument over this is precisely what led to putting the 20% cap in on the deer tags, where we had a 20% either direction window where we don't have any discussion because, I mean, we're mandated by the legislation to manage to the plan. The division's supposed to create a plan. The plan goes through the public process. We adopt the plan. And then the law says the division has to manage to the plan, whatever the objective in the plan is. And then we go through the public process and we constantly want to change it. And I think as big as that permit increase is, and it kind of raised my eyebrows when I seen it too. I was like, whoa, that much in 1 year? But I think we need to give the biologists the benefit of the doubt on this, and they're out there boots on the ground all year long. I see them out there on the units that I'm around. They are there. They're working their butts off. They know what's going on. They know their unit better than anybody. I think we should go with the biologist recommendations and division's recommendations on NEBO.
How many bull elk archery tag, late archery tags do we have? We only have them on a few units, right? Mike? I know we have them on Monroe, we have them on a few others.
So we have them on all of our limited entry units. This was something that came about with the latest elk plan revision.
There's
And
like 5,
started
right?
with 5. Some of our biologists have been more aggressive or less aggressive in increasing those. In total, we had 158 permits last year. The recommendation from the division is to have a total of 193 permits this year. Some of those units, I think the highest have 20, and then on the low end, you have units with 5.
So what's about the average increase on each of the units? Because this is asking for 5 on all of them.
The increase that the division recommended, on some units, it's 0. The ones that are increasing, the recommendation was an increase of 5 permits, except for the Southwest Desert South. That was an increase from 10 to 20.
Okay.
Would it maybe be beneficial to do versus blanketed 5 on each unit and proportional to the number of permits that are on there, or would it make a difference?
Either way, I mean, these were kind of a new thing with the plan, and the plan is kind of vague on how many permits we should set. It was written in there as, let's try this. As long as success rates stay low, let's increase them and see what happens. And success rates have stayed low. Satisfaction ratings have been good. We've heard a lot of positive feedback from them. So 5 permits across all the units doesn't scare me. I don't think it's that big of an issue. When we have our mid-plan elk revision this summer, I think it's something we're going to discuss on giving more direction to the biologists on how to recommend these permits in the future.
I think it's probably for Lindy, but what was the appetite for these? Were they all, like, how many permits, how many people applied for them, and what do we know the draw success rate? On average, I know they'll be different.
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking, so just give me 2 seconds to pull it up. Success rate, that would definitely be a mic thing. So, okay. Just 1 second. Do you have like a particular unit? Just because each one is going to kind of vary.
Did any units go undersubscribed, meaning they were
No.
left over?
No, we didn't have any elk last year that didn't go through.
Were they going to pretty high point holders?
So like I said, it just depends. I'd have to go through all,
Well-
unit, but, like right now I'm just pulling up a few random ones. Some of our popular elk units.
What about Manti and Wasatch?
So the Manti on the late archery hunt, it looks like the max, we offered 9 permits total last year on that unit. Max points went to, the highest was 9. And since we offered 5, we offered a max point to someone that had 5 points that drew out within the max point round.
Okay.
So, and then on the Wasatch, that one looks like we offered 8 permits total on the Wasatch Lake archery, and the highest max point holder was 6, and 5 the people that drew out with max points.
So it sounds like there is an appetite, and I would imagine there's room for growth as far as the public becomes aware of them more and they learn more. So
Yeah,
that
so
answered you answered my question. It's
Yeah.
kind of what helped me with my decision.
Thank you.
I think I missed it. The success rates on those are really low. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, average statewide it's been between 17 and 22%.
Okay, so you have pretty generous increases already. Right?
Yeah,
Is it,
on a lot of the units. Some of them are not increasing, like Book Cliffs, Bitter Creek, Boulder, Cache. Those aren't recommending increases, but like the Pavant, it's recommending an increase. Recommendation to increase on the Beaver, Southwest Desert, Dutton, Nebo, Penguich Lake. So increase on a lot of them, but not all of them.
okay, so is forcing them all to increase it, even though when you were looking at numbers and trying to decide what was going to be best, is that a problem? Is that, if there was no increase, there's obviously a reason that there was no increase on the unit. Is forcing them to all of a sudden have 5 tags in addition to what they already had, is that going to mess anything up?
No, like I said, talking to the different biologists, I don't think there wasn't any major concerns on our end if that was increased.
I'm going to ask specifically on Southwest South. I've heard some complaints that they're struggling finding elk there. Is that one that you feel would be justified? It's already going up 10. Do we want to bump it up to 15 additional from last year?
Let me pull up success rates for you on that one. So Southwest Desert South, the first 2 years were actually 0% harvest success. And then this past year was 12.5%. So low success. To be candid, that was kind of the point of the hunt. That was the reason why we wanted to try these. And so yeah, folks should know what they're getting into if they're going to apply for this. It's going to be a difficult hunt.
I fully agree, but that one, there might be others that are similar to that, but just from my neck of the woods, I think a 10 tag, we can stick with that, but I don't know if I want to go with 15 for this year. We're still giving them plenty of opportunity with additional 10. And I agree, they know what they're getting into. It's tough, but give them a chance a little bit.
Austin, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little context. when I was on that elk committee, putting together the statewide plan, the idea was to provide some opportunity with these late archery elk hunts and put them in a tough season. We did ask for the age objective of harvested bulls on this hunt to not be included in the unit management overall objective, so that it would not affect and drag down that age objective if these late archery hunters were able to find and kill bulls. So as I remember it, we wanted to give leeway to the biologists to set what they thought would be negligible to the overall harvest as strictly an opportunity hunt. So the concern was with the ease of getting crossbow permits, everything, if someone did start to kill some big bulls on these late hunts, it would take away opportunity from the early regular hunts. So we wanted to be careful of that and let the biologists set what would be a negligible harvest for this opportunity hunt. Just to keep that in mind.
I know as I've kind of monitored that hunt, a lot of the guys that have success on it were using crossbows, not actual archery. Well, I guess that's actual archery, but that was how it was done. It wasn't a traditional way because they're banded up different. It's a hard hunt for sure. So bring it back to the board for discussion.
Just to clarify, I do feel like it's I'm not opposed to increasing by 5 on the majority of them, but that's one that someone did comment on, the southern region, and wanted to make sure I addressed that one. But I feel like that is a significant increase from 10 up to 25. So from last year to this year. So I'd probably recommend to keep that one the same and keep the rest at just increasing 5.
So I guess another question on clarification for the 5 additional that has been suggested. Are we talking 5 additional permits above the increases that the division has on some of those units, or are we just talking 5 permits above last year for each of the units?
Brad, what'd you guys say?
Yeah, our motion is 5 additional permits on top of the proposed permit numbers. So some of those could be an increase of more than 5 total from last year's permits.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I add one point of clarification?
Yes, please.
Dustin just mentioned to me, we did have a couple of units that did go undersubscribed. The LaSalle's and San Juan were both undersubscribed last year.
Board members, what do you think?
I thought I knew what I wanted, Austin. He's making me think a little harder now. So I want to hear what other people's comments are, what they think. I'm not sure I'm ready to make a motion.
Well, the elk plan is up for mid-year this summer, so we'll be talking about that again, I'm sure.
Mike, on looking at some of these units with we're only 5 tags on the Brook Cliffs Bitter Creek. Do you have numbers for, I'm sorry to blindside you with this, but do you have the numbers for the hunter success rate on that?
I do, yep, I can pull that up. You asked for Brook Cliffs Bitter Creek, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first year we had 5 permits. So we've stayed at 5 permits all 3 years. The first year was 0%. The next year was 100% success. And then the following year was 20%. That second year with 100% success, only 4 of the hunters reported. So there could have been one that didn't harvest. But.
Okay. So described, so everything but San Juan and LaSalle, maybe add 2. Is that a thought?
So one other clarification again, sorry about this. It's some confusion. It wasn't the San Juan and LaSalle. We actually only had 1 tag, and it was on the Cache Meadowville that went undersubscribed. We were looking at different reports.
Okay.
So yeah, those weren't undersubscribed. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
You know, I like the idea for more opportunity and stuff, but I was You know, and it was, I thought that the increase in tags this year was a pretty generous archery increase, you know, based on the data and stuff like that. And I feel like that's the reason they have the mid-plan review, is to look at it closely again based on what's happened on the first half of the plan and see what else needs to be tweaked. I don't know if, I think that's a better place to decide adding a bunch of tags, whether it'll tolerate it. I mean, especially based on the increases that are already there. So
I think the message was sent that there's interest in those. And so I would hope the biologists in the local area in those units are listening to this conversation and can take that into consideration for future recommendations. But I was for this, but having listened to the conversation and where we're at, I could probably just say we hold off on those myself.
I agree with Justin. I'm for the idea, but across the board in every unit, I don't think it's workable. And I think it's probably a good thing to just wait for the elk committee to look at it, talk about it unit by unit, have the biologists input on it this summer.
Mr. Chair,
yes, Chris.
I have a couple of comments. I agree with Kent and Justin about standing pat on those additional tags, but I am wanting a little more discussion on the Nebo situation. How big of an increase is this if in this bull elk harvest, and what is the average age at harvest? What's the percentage increase? I thought I heard you say that the target was 5.5 and the average is 7, but that may have been another unit.
Yeah, so the age objective is 5.5 to 6 years old. This past year they were at 7, was the average age of the bulls that were harvested. Year before that was 7.1. Year before that was 6.6. The recommendation for this year is to go from 95 permits last year up to 128. For historical context, back in like 2000, let me make sure I got this right. In 2010, we were up to 144 permits at that time, and we only had about 1,100 elk on the unit. That was the population estimate. Now we're over 2,000 elk, significantly more elk. And so that's why the biologists felt comfortable being aggressive.
Well, it's hard to argue with those numbers.
Paula, go ahead.
I called and talked to Wes last night just because I had a few questions on Nebo too. One of the things that came up in RAC was, are those animals moving back and forth from Nebo to Manti and creating maybe an influx in counts? And his answer was no, it's very minimal, maybe a few, but there's also Nebo that comes back and forth minimally. So very small percentages there. Another thing just to keep in mind too is that this objective was raised just back in 2023 from 1,450 to 2,200, which is a win. That's fantastic. And I feel like we're now over objective, guessing 2,700. The people that were involved in decreasing that or increasing that objective, we need to prove that we can keep it to where we can hold it so that doesn't come in jeopardy in the future and we have to bump back down to a lower objective. I think it's important to keep those relationships and make sure that and the division's proven that we can do, we can keep an objective. They're required to do that. So, I mean, I feel like it's a justified increase. And also just to keep relations good on ag side, on sportsmen, everybody's got to give a little bit sometimes. So it is a hard, I mean, I agree, Chris, as you were saying, you look at it and it kind of, you're like, whoa. But if you do look at all the numbers involved, we have, I mean, age class is over, objective is over. They're counting, they're physically seeing. So it's a hard one to not go with what the recommendation is.
Any other comments? Bob?
Yeah, I'll just, I guess echo that. You just like with the deer, you see the higher increases and you take a double look at it and wonder why, and then you start looking into it and the reasons why, and then it makes sense. And with the NEBO, yeah, it's large increase, but I can see why with the age objectives and what the objective is and what we're trying to hit it. So I would agree with that with NEBO, with what the divisions presented, and then with the archery. I don't agree with the 5 tags above what the divisions proposed on some of those units. And it is an opportunity. It is a low hunt, but low success. And I think there's value in that for opportunity. And I was looking at some of the points. I know Lindy went over a few of those too, but I was looking at some of the points that people had that drew those tags. And it is, there is people putting in for it. And I guess you want to point creep. I guess it could help address point creep in some there too. But yeah, I'm not sure about those archery tags. I think we got the mid plan review for the out coming up. Probably another good place to address that is in that mid plan review coming up here this summer.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the division's recommendation for the bull elk as stated without any additions or subtractions.
Okay, motion by Chris,
I'll second it.
seconded by Kent. Any questions or clarifications on the motion? To accept the division's presentation as recommended. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right. Mike, we're back. We're going to talk about, this is an action item 2, and it's the pronghorn recommendations for 2026.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to add, but happy to help with questions.
Okay, questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs?
Sorry, I'm so slow, Mr. Chairman. I just one question. Something that came up in our online comments was questions about age class. Would you speak to that just for the benefit of the public, please, and why it's managed for the 2 to 3 year old bucks?
You bet. Yep. We used to manage pronghorn based on buck-doe ratios, and in 2000, I believe it was 17 or 18, we revised the statewide pronghorn plan and we changed to age management. So now our objective is based on the age of the harvested bucks, the average age of harvested bucks, and we're shooting for an age of 2 to 3 year old bucks. That significantly changed the amount of permits and opportunity that we were able to offer to the public. The big reason why we made that switch is that there was a lot of data out there that showed that bucks past 3 years old don't significantly grow a lot more horns on their horn size. So by 3 years old, a buck has grown the majority of, he's reached a lot of his horn potential. And so there wasn't a big need to push for having 6, 7 year old pronghorn bucks on the landscape. And so we've been able to increase permits a lot and offer a lot more opportunity. And we are still monitoring buck-doe ratios in our preseason classifications, make sure that we're not going to be damaging the herd at a biological level or anything, but I've been able to offer a lot more opportunity. The big reason is the horn size. That's why we made that switch.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll have the director summarize the public comments.
Yeah, we had 9 submissions and it split out nicely. We had 4 comments that strongly agreed with our permit recommendations. We had 4 comments that somewhat or strongly disagreed, and we had 1 that was neutral. Comments included increased age objective on all pronghorn units.
Thank you. Rack chairs. Brad.
In Northern Region, we had 1 motion that was to accept the permit recommendations as presented. That passed unanimously.
Similarly, the Central Region had 1 motion to accept as presented. That passed unanimously.
Austin.
We'll keep up the trend. Southern Region had 1 motion to pass as presented, passed unanimous.
We had a motion that was unanimously approved to recommend as presented.
Okay, Eric?
Northeastern, sometimes we just go with the flow, and we did as well pass this one unanimously.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like it passed all of them. I'll entertain some discussion. Oh, we have public comment. Thank you. Tanner Carlson.
Tanner Carlson with SFW. I appreciate Troy letting me speak on the easy topic today. So thanks, Troy. That's nice. Appreciate all of your time. SFW does support the division's recommendations, and thank you.
Thanks, Tanner. All right, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and potential motion.
That was nice of SFW to let Tanner feel important as he came up there today. But I think with this topic and all the others, again, I want to give thanks to the RAC. I had an opportunity to watch most of them live and one recorded. And in all of these topics, I think our RACs have done a phenomenal job vetting through questions and comments. And so my hat's off to all of our RAC members throughout the state. And with that, with their voting unanimous and a lot of discussions, all right, I'd make a motion that we accept the pronghorn permit recommendations as presented.
Motion by Justin. Did you second it? Second. Seconded by Chris. Any discussion on the motion at all? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay. We're to action item number 11, analyst permit recommendations, and we'll have Mike Wardle speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I don't have anything to add, but happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one. Just thank you, Chair. Can you just give me some history on the Beaver City archery hunt and why that came about? That is literally my backyard.
Yeah, you bet. Beaver City, beavers had a long history of resident deer issues. We've received a lot of complaints over the years from residents. We worked pretty closely with the city council and held some city council meetings and talked about various options of, from trapping euthanize to holding an archery only doe hunt. And that was what the city council felt like would work there. This was a series of multiple city council meetings over years. But yeah, that was their request. And in an effort to try and control the resident deer population. So the boundary, if you look at it, it's tied to Beaver City. The season dates start August 1st, and I think they go to September 14th, something like that, first or second week of September. The reason those are in those early dates is so that we avoid any harvest of migratory deer. A lot of deer migrate down into there during the later months into the fall, and we want to make sure that this hunt is targeting the deer that are eating tomatoes and tulips and causing damage and really lowering social tolerance for wildlife. So.
Great, thank you. It's definitely needed.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, and Rusty alluded to this in his presentation, but the concerns have been raised in the RACs over the antlerless moose hunts. Is the division prepared? Do you think that maybe it's a good idea to just kind of push pause on hunting antlerless moose this year?
Not altogether. We're not seeing the same concerns for like the Morgan Southridge antlerless hunt. But yeah, I think if we had the data we have now back in February, we probably would have recommended, probably tried to keep the hunt on the books and maybe recommended one permit or something. But we're comfortable, if the board wants to bring that down to one or two or put a pause on it altogether this year, I think we're comfortable with that either way. Specifically on the Wasatch.
Brian.
Yeah, I've got a long history of Morgan Rich up there running, and full disclosure, run a CWMU I'm really concerned about the proposed permits of 7 on Morgan Rich, that's rifle or any legal weapon, and then 3 more. That's 10 coming off there. With the tick issue that we have now, can you tell me, did we do any aerial counts? Do we have any collared moose on the Morgan Rich unit? I understand Wasatch Mountains, there were quite a few that were done, and you've been able to document that mortality. I think there's going to be a self-correction here, and I'll state why, is that we've got some trail cameras up on the ranch that have missing a bull, Angus bull.
Yeah, I spoke
Sold
to,
out to do that, and we're doing it. We're starting to see moose come on. I've also spent some time up there, and I have not seen a calf from last year, yearly. They're gone. I haven't seen one. I saw 7 cows, 2 look in really rough shape, and then we've had a couple more show up on some cameras that are really done. I'm really concerned that taking 10 off, not counting, I think Deseret's taken some cows this year, total of 5. And then the spillover, I don't think there was any recommendation for cow moose hunts on the cache, correct?
on
the cache unit?
Correct, yeah, just Morgan Southridge.
That's a pretty small area with a lot of private land and very little public land. And I think to harvest that kind of, when I say self-correct, I think we're going to do it because we're going to lose our recruitment. And I'm really concerned that that's way too many where we're currently at, and staying with that recommendation. I talked to one of your biologists and said they counted 10,000 ticks on one single animal. Literally took them off of that animal. I mean, I don't know how anything can survive with 10,000 ticks on it. It just can't. And I know it's attributed to the winter, the real mild winter. That's where it comes from. Moose do extremely well in deep, cold snow conditions because it kills those ticks in the winter. But I'm really concerned that this is going to really affect the population levels in those areas, especially because we don't really have the data from like Wasatch West. It's not there to support this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments. I can just speak to the justification for that. I spoke to the biologist yesterday and just confirmed that we hadn't seen any losses on Morgan South Rich, and understanding there's not the number of callers in that area that are on the Wasatch. However, most of our Wasatch mortalities have just been incidental, observations that we've gone to. And the biologist assured me that they reached out to some landowners, and at least those landowners said they weren't seeing any losses. We haven't documented any losses. So undoubtedly probably some ticks. And we're also over objective. I don't know when the last flight was there, but according to the last flight, we were over objective on that moose population. So that's the justification for the antlerless permits. 10 and then 3 on the archery, because there is a limited amount of public land. And so to cram everybody on one hunt would be a little more difficult. So at least that's the reasoning behind it.
I can appreciate that, but I challenge the fact that we haven't seen the loss. I mean, I haven't spent a ton of time on 14,000 acres looking for dead moose yet. I can promise you we're going to find them. We're just coming out of a winter and getting rid of snowdrifts and access and some other things. And the higher you go, that's the same way. I don't feel like because things haven't been reported, you're talking about a ton of private land and private land having to give you that feedback. Not taking this casual, but just to casually say that we haven't seen, reported loss is going to reflect in, I think, this next year. And I would hope that you guys would take a real conservative approach on these permit numbers and what they're being recommended. Because I'll tell you straight up, I'll absolutely vote against this. So.
And I don't disagree with you. I'm sure there's been some loss. It just seems like comparatively to the Wasatch, it's not as bad, not as dire. But I
just
can
don't
understand
see
where
the
you're coming
comparison
from.
though, because we don't have the same. It's kind of apples and oranges.
Yep, I can appreciate
in terms of that. So.
Go ahead, Chris.
If I'm not mistaken, did we not get a a letter from the district ranger in Fish Lake regarding the Monroe fire and antlerless harvest. Am I conflating that with something else, encouraging us to keep the numbers up? And I was curious to know what the division, what Michael or Brother Robinson over there, whoever's in charge, would think about that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I can speak to that. So the Monroe recently had a big fire last summer. There's been some concern about elk numbers. I spoke with Vance, our biologist. So currently the population objective on the Monroe is a range. So in the southern part of the state, we've chosen to go to a range on a lot of our units. The range is from 1,000 to 1,400 elk on that unit. Prior to that change, it was actually up to around 1,800 elk was the previous objective. His current estimate is 1,200, so he's within that objective. For the conversation, last year he had 30 public cow tags on the unit. This year he recommended 40 permits. In talking with him, a lot of his harvest actually comes through other methods, other tools. The Monroe, it's surrounded by ag fields, right? So you have the Cusharon Valley, quite a bit of ag there, ag along the foothills from Annabella to Monroe, and then down all the way to Kingston. And so he issues quite a bit of mitigation cow permits in order to help keep elk out of the alfalfa fields. And that's actually where a lot of his harvest comes from. So he said he was comfortable with his current recommendation. And having said that, we've really charged all of our biologists this summer with the drought to be in close communication with their Forest Service folks, to talk with the district ranger, talk with the range cons and their wildlife biologists, and monitor what's going on in the mountain. And if we're starting to see damage, habitat damage from elk, we have the opportunity to come back in August and add additional cow permits. That's something that we've committed that we're going to do this summer, is we're going to be in close communication and really monitoring that, especially on the Monroe with the recent fire. We want to make sure those elk aren't going to be inhibiting that growth from coming back.
rehab.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? You and I talked about this a little bit before, and about that. Yeah, that I know the concern, and I know some of it's coming from the cattlemen, because they're worried about who gets to eat what's there. But where we have the ability to increase tags later in the fall if needed, I think that's a good escape card. So.
And to be fair, I want to make it clear, like, the division is mindful of that. It's difficult as a rancher to be told by the Forest Service that you have to either run fewer cows or run a shorter amount of time, and then you still see the elk on the mountain. I can understand that frustration, and so that's why we've really committed to making sure that we're communicating with our public land partners and taking a hard look at those permits in August. So.
Very good. All right, questions from the rack chairs. Brad.
Right, well, this is probably going to involve Darren too. On Morgan South Ridge on antlerless moose, how many CWMU antlerless permits are there for moose? If we're saying we're 200 head over objective, are the CWMUs harvesting as well?
Yeah, so we're in this cycle, we're recommending seven? No, 6. There's 5. Deseret's requesting 5, and then there's an additional one on the Beaver Creek, I think. So that'd be for this coming fall.
Is that the same as last year, or those increases?
No, that's an increase for Deseret. Yeah.
Any others from the rack chairs? All right, we'll have the director summarize public comments.
Yeah, we had 11 submissions on this. 6 comments somewhat or strongly disagreed with the permit recommendations. 4 comments somewhat or strongly agreed, and 1 was neutral. Comments included disagreeing with the NEMO permit numbers. A few comments talked about how the division should issue 0 doe permits statewide, and then additional comments on cow moose harvest on the Wasatch unit.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll hear from the rack chairs regarding your votes and the disposition of their discussions. Brad?
Okay, Northern Region, we had one motion that was to accept the antlerless permit recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously.
The Central Region had one motion to approve the recommendation as presented, with the exception that we take cow moose hunt on the Wasatch down to 0. That passed 8 in favor, 3 opposed. The 3 opposed didn't want to go all the way to 0.
Okay, Austin?
Southern Region is fresh out of cow moose, but we did not discuss that too much, but we did pass as presented unanimously.
Okay, Scoot?
In the Southeast region, the recommendation was passed unanimously, with the exception to drop the tags for antlerless moose on the Wasatch to 1.
To 1, okay. Eric?
Similar to the Southeast region, the Northeast region had a motion to accept the permit numbers as presented and drop the Wasatch Moose Hunt permit number to 1 permit. And then we also had a little bit of a discussion about potentially using the antlerless elk control permits again. I know there's some, but some of the other units in our area, like the Wasatch, were brought up.
Okay. All right, thank you. We have a couple of public comment cards. Kevin Norman and then Phil Crowther.
Kevin Norman representing SFW. Tanner gets the easy ones. I get the Paul Niemeyer recommendations. So SFW supports the division's recommendations with one exception. There was some concern on the Parker with just the way it's been so up and down, maybe pumping the brakes on the amount of doe antelope tags there, to reducing it to 200 from 250. And then as far as the moose goes, we definitely enjoy the discussion, maybe pumping the brakes a little bit on some of these cow moose tags as well, with the problem at hand with the tick. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Phil?
Good afternoon. Phil Crowther. I am speaking on behalf of Farm Bureau. Wade Garrett and Troy Henry are kind of in opposite ends of the state today, and they asked if I would just make comment that Farm Bureau supports the division's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. All right, so on the racks, the Northern, Southern, Southeastern, Northeastern, all passed unanimously. The Central had a motion 10-1. I know there was quite a bit to talk about reducing the moose permits in all of the racks, especially, with the tick outbreak. And at that point in time, they were seeing quite a few dead calves. And so I think that's so noted. We'll bring it back to the
Mr.
board.
Chair, can I make
Yes.
a correction? I said unanimously it was 7-1 in our rack.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the board for your discussion and maybe a motion.
Rusty? Can I just ask another question on the moose, especially on the Morgan Ridge versus the Wasatch? How many acres are in the Wasatch unit approximately versus Morgan Ridge?
You're asking a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
I'd have to log into my Onyx and calculate it.
Okay, but let's probably
It's a
assume
big
that
area.
the Wasatch is bigger
Yeah.
than Morgan Ridge with a ton of private land in there. And the recommendations that have come through the rack, I mean, they've whittled it down to 1 on the Wasatch, if I heard correctly. Okay, at least a couple of them, I believe. And we're sitting at.
Just one quick point of clarification. The cow moose unit is actually pretty small. It encompasses a portion of the Wasatch West.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I add in all of the private acres versus the public acres in Morgan Ridge, I mean, we're going to kill 21 cow moose. Probably going to have 100% success, I would assume. That seems like way too many considering the situation we're in with our ticks and what's going on there. To me, that's just really out of whack. So I just want to make that additional comment. Thank you.
Rusty, the biologists there, are they seeing on the Morgan South Ridge specifically, are they seeing a lack of calves when they are sighting moose, or do they have concern with that, or?
I know as I've talked to landowners, that's been some of the reports is that the cows are looking okay, but they're not seeing a lot of calves. So, which is not unprecedented. We have ebbs and flows in our calf recruitment. But yeah, I don't know it's to the level of the Wasatch for sure.
I was surprised to hear that we were over objective on moose anywhere. Can you clarify that again, where we're over objective and what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's different than elk, right? We try to manage elk because there's a lot of pressures from different angles to manage to an objective. Likewise, we've tried to set objectives for moose and tried to stay to that level like we're expected to. The objective on the Morgan South Ridge is 500, and the current model estimate is about 775. And so we've been over for 2-3 years now, and so I think I'm not sure when we started those cow hunts, but that's kind of, just an opportunity. The opportunity exists. We're over objective. There's not a ton of pressure to get it clear to 500, but we're showing some efforts to lower that population where we can, and offer some opportunity given that there is limited public ground.
Do you see any biological impact by not holding the cow permit or the cow hunts this coming year and wait in lieu of what information we have with the ticks and what our landowners and what the majority of that unit is private land? What are your thoughts on that?
If we were to discontinue both hunts, would there be a biological impact? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. I mean.
Sorry, no, not bull, just cow.
Just the cow. I mean, it's 10 permits on Morgan South Ridge. So it's that impact, 10 likely reproductive cows in the future. But is it going to break the bank one way or another? No. But the one consideration is that a lot of people have been applying for these permits for 19, 20 years now. And so to discontinue that altogether, I also don't know if there's a policy in place that would even allow us to let people apply for a bonus point with no hunts on the books. So that would be one consideration.
Could I ask a question on when was the last time we flew this? You said the model says we have 700 plus.
Yeah,
moose on the unit.
2024 was the last time we.
Good conditions?
Yes, I believe in 2024 we had decent, probably not the greatest conditions.
Yeah, because like this year would be
Really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
This question's for Lindy. I don't know if you can answer it or not. I mean, before when we stopped cow moose hunting, you could still buy a bonus point. Would that be the same this time?
No, we actually changed the rule years ago that if we cannot offer the hunt, you cannot purchase a point. So if you discontinue cow moose hunts, no one can apply for a point for cow moose.
Bummer.
So that would be the con of getting rid of the hunt,
Because some have already applied.
because no one could apply.
No, so it wouldn't, it's a moot point
Yeah, but-
because it would stay the same. but-
Yeah, so no one can gain an advantage by buying points, because that's what was happening when we canceled the actual hunts. People were still buying points for something that may or may not ever come back. So.
Okay. I guess for the board, I asked the question, but I don't have the appetite to eliminate completely the moose hunt, but I would consider maybe lowering the numbers. And as we think about it, even the fact that we have 2 permits, so there was a max point plus random. If we entertain lowering numbers at all, I don't think would be wise to completely eliminate the hunt.
Just like to make one more comment or make a clarification. I stated that I'm a CWMU operator. I want to make it really clear that my comments on this is not for some kind of gain on the ranch that I run. Okay, I'm looking at the entire unit and the health of the moose population there. I really feel like there's going to be more mortality from these ticks this year than ever than we know about. And I think it's going to self-correct on what actually a cow moose hunt is, which is control the population. I'm really concerned with that. So I know I can still vote on this because it's not attached to the CWMU, any of these permits. However, I want to make it clear too that my objective here is to make a healthy, keep the unit healthy and have a viable population. I mean, we've been 100% for 28 years on bull moose tags. And I provide a fair amount of opportunity. One tag every year, and every 3 years I give two. So that's in 4 years, in 3 years, the public gets 4 opportunities to hunt private land and kill a bull moose. That's important. It is important to the landowners, but it's also very important, I think, to the public. And so I think we want to make sure that we're not going too far here. Moose are a nomadic animal. They travel far distances. What you may count on me one day, you may not see ever again because they might be up in Meadowville. I don't know. So just a comment and a clarification of where I'm at. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Chris.
So, Ryan, is it Morgan South Ridge that you're mainly concerned about, but the rest of the proposal you're okay with?
Yeah, I'm concerned with that. I mean, Wasatch, I would probably agree with what came through some of the racks on reducing it to 1, especially because they've got documented cases of the ticks and what's going on there. And I just don't think we have a fair amount. So yes, Morgan Ridge.
If these reductions were to occur, Michael or Rusty, say down to 1 on the Wasatch and not in, or take away the Morgan South Ridge, how many total permits is that?
The current recommendation is 10 total on Morgan South Ridge and 5 on the Wasatch.
So a reduction of 14. Took down
Yes.
to 1 on Wasatch and all 10.
If you went to 1 on the Wasatch and 0 on Morgan South Ridge, yeah, that would be 15 to 1. Yeah.
And a possible compromise would be to lower them, as Justin said, to a reasonable number that wouldn't have the impact, but still provide opportunity for bonus points to still be applied or people to apply. I'd hate to see it go to that where nobody can even get a bonus point on the unit. I just feel like this is got a lot of history there, and I feel like this is just a little bit too far with these numbers.
We'd also need to consider the non-resident permit as well, that's in there as well, right? So if you did 1, we would be eliminating the non-resident hunt, correctly? Am I correct with that?
Yes, but at this point, antlerless hasn't been set. So, yeah, bucks and bulls, that goes out beforehand, but not antlers.
Ryan, an abundance of caution, what if we just split the recommendation in half? And, I mean, you say there's 700 some odd moose, and we're really dealing around the fringes of the total population, like you've said, or others have said, the world's not going to come to an end, and that this is not unprecedented. But given that we have had an unprecedented dry, warm winter that has led to the proliferation of these ticks, that it might maybe splitting the baby. It gives some opportunity and it gives some deference to the concerns.
Brian, what kind of a number would you be comfortable with up in your area? A reduction for sure, but what kind of a number?
You're probably not looking for zero.
I was
So-
not, no.
So, yeah, and that probably wouldn't be good, but I think we need to reduce it down to about 30%. You know, that would be me. I mean, the thing we're not sure of is that what kind of mortality have we had already and going to continue to have over the course of the next few months. We don't know that, and that again could be a self-correcting thing. If we're over objective, I understand that, but you know, I remember 10 plus years ago, we had blue tongue go through there. It wiped out our moose, and we struggled for 5 to 7 years to get them back to a reasonable level, and no permits were cut. You know, so obviously I have some passion here, but I'll entertain what somebody else wants to make a recommendation.
Rusty, one of the reasons we manage the population numbers is just to have tolerance for the people whose land they're on a lot. Is that if we cut the cow tags to 30%, would that, I guess we could correct it next year if there ended up being a plethora of extra moose.
Yeah, I don't know what pressures the biologist is under specifically in Morgan South Ridge. On the Wasatch, there's some urban issues. And that's kind of why that hunt was created. There's some urban conflicts and some vehicle collisions, public safety concerns, that sort of thing. So hunting moose on the Wasatch around Populous was kind of the intent of that hunt on the Morgan South Ridge. I don't know that it's a lot of the same concerns, but certainly an effort to manage to a population objective that we're expected to do.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll
Take a
make a
stab.
mo-
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm gonna defer to Kent. He's got it lit up.
Sure. Yeah. I'll take a stab at a motion here. And I'll just do this one for the antlerless moose to begin with, and then we can address the rest of it later. Would that work for you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Okay, so with regard to the antlerless moose, I would make a motion that we reduce the Wasatch Mountains Salt Lake Timpanogos unit to 2 permits for this year, and reduce the Morgan South Ridge to 8 permits total.
How many was that?
8.
8.
What was the proposal? Was it? And so we're just reducing it to?
Reduce it by 2. It's at 10 right now, so it would reduce by 2. So you'd take 1 off of the any legal weapon and 1 off of the archery, and then reduce the Wasatch Mountain Salt Lake Timpanogos down to 2 permits, which would still leave a max point holder option in the draw.
Okay, there's a motion by Kent. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded by Bob. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, let's take,
I was just gonna say, I would like to see I like the Wasatch one. I still think the Morgan South Ridge, I'd like to see a little bit more than just 2, but I'll listen to everyone. I would like to see it cut in half, 50%, and go to 5.
I'm not gonna die on that with her to confront the notice.
We have it looks like we
so
have,
Kent, do you have a,
but you have a second, right? So
would you agree to an amendment to your motion, Kent?
I can go for my motion if you're okay with it, Bob.
Yeah, you're talking half, is that what you said? For the,
Half.
okay, yeah, I can go with that
5
too.
instead of 8.
5 instead of 8. You do
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
So amended.
All right, we have a motion to reduce the Morgan Ridge by half and then just the 2 on the Wasatch for this year.
I'm sorry, can I have a clarification on that? So would that go 5 and 2 for the archery and rifle, any legal weapon, or how do you want to split out how do you want to break out those 5?
Do you want me to address that, or do you want to address that? Rusty?
That was my question, just if you're bringing it down to 5 total for the
Okay.
Morgan Southridge, would you go 3 any legal weapon, 2 archery? Or what are your weapon split recommendations on that?
So,
There's 2 separate hunts, one any legal weapon that was we were
yeah,
recommending
there's
7.
two separate hunts, so cutting in half, it's hard to split 3 in half, isn't it?
3 and 2.
So we can go three rifle and 2 archery. How's that sound? In the motion.
I
Does
would
that
get-
make sense, Stacy, or are you gonna start throwing M&Ms at me?
Is that okay with you, Bob?
Yeah, I'll second that too. That sounds good.
Okay, Stacy, did you get that? Okay. All right, ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes 5-1. All right. Okay, our next one is number 12, CWA Atlas recommendations, and then we'll have Darren Du Bois talk to us about that. What?
Did you guys vote on the
Oh,
remainder of the
yes.
Atlas?
Goodbye, yeah. Thought we had momentum there for a second.
We
All
got,
right, I'll entertain a motion on the rest of the proposal.
I'll make a motion that we approve the remainder of the division's antlerless permit recommendations as presented.
Motion by Kent. Second by Chris.
Are you willing to make an amendment on Monroe to just increase the elk from 40 to 60?
And do it now instead of waiting to see what happens.
I made the motion. I'll accept that, Paula. And Chris is good with it too, so we further made muddy water for Stacy.
All right, so we have a amendment by Paul on the motion to add another 20 cow tags to the Monroe cow harvest. In addition to the balance of the division's proposal. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Okay, is that everybody? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Now, Darren, we're ready for the analyst permit recommendations for CWMUs.
Morning, happy to be here. I don't have anything to add, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, there'll be a point in here where I have a conflict of interest regarding one of the CWMUs and want to recuse myself. I can bow out now.
Okay, no, you just, when voting happens, that would be the time.
Thank you.
Ryan,
Yeah, I echo what,
same thing?
yeah, same,
Okay. Now,
recuse.
we'll participate until the vote and then we'll recuse you. All right. Any questions from the board?
Seems that we just cut permits for the public on CWMUs for cow moose, especially the Morgan South Ridge where there's quite a few of them. Do you feel like do you see problems? I know we've now had people apply. No, I guess we haven't.
No,
we haven't applied for these yet, so we can't still
Yeah,
address
so,
that,
so
right?
that's totally on the board. I think all the discussion that's occurred applies here. I think the only real difference is that we're just talking about 2 individual properties that are asking for cow permits. I know Deseret, looking at the numbers of moose they had, they felt like they wanted to see this, they're asking for 5. They've had 2 in the past, so this would be 2 private, 3 public. And then Beaver Hollow is strictly a moose CWMU, and they're asking for 1. I think given where we are with the objective and what they're seeing on their individual properties, that we're we're probably okay, even if we do see some lack of recruitment. There is a risk of habitat damage. My understanding is they're not quite seeing it yet, but if you do get too many moose, you start to see them impact that mountain mahogany up in that country. And Deseret, I think in particular, is concerned just about the number of moose they've got, and they feel like they'd like to see some harvest opportunity. So that's kind of where we are on it, but I think all the other discussion's still relevant.
Any other questions from the board?
So on the one permit, please remind me what the name of, what CWMU was it?
Beaver Hollow, so that's on Morgan Southridge as well.
So the Beaver Hollow, that will be to public, when there's one that will,
Yeah, they're actually only asking for one permit, so this would be their first year, and we generally give that to the public hunter the first year, and then it rotates through, so it'll go public, private, public, and yeah.
and of the 5 that Deseret is requesting, what is the split on that?
2 private, 3 public.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the rack chairs?
I have
Go ahead,
one
Austin.
question. Are there any CWMUs on Morgan Southridge that are not moose CWMUs that would allow public draw hunters to come on if they just have a regular Morgan Southridge tag? Or are they confined to just those little tiny pieces of public where they can hunt?
As far as cow harvest goes, yeah, I mean, the CWMU, you'd have to have a CWMU permit to hunt that property. So any public tags, they'd have to stick to the public ground that's available. Was that your question, or maybe I'm misunderstanding?
I'm asking if they're just a CWMU for deer, or
Oh, yeah.
they could
Yeah.
bring a public hunter on.
Yeah,
from moose,
the
correct?
hunt boundary is essentially for the species. So if they're a deer CWMU, or in the case of Beaver Hollow, a moose CWMU, then that's private property that could be hunted with a regular tag on for other species.
Any other questions from the rack chairs? Okay, well, we have public comments on this one.
We had 7 submissions on this. 3 of our comments strongly agreed with the division's proposal. 3 comments somewhat or strongly disagreed, and 1 was neutral. Comments included that certain CWMU should not be allowed to cut their cow elk permits.
All right. All right, we'll bring it to the rack chairs to summarize your motions and any discussion pertaining.
Northern Region, we had one motion that was to accept the recommendation as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Okay.
The Central Region had one motion to accept the recommendation as presented, and that passed 10 in favor, 1 opposed, and I don't remember why.
Okay.
Southern had one motion to accept as presented, passed unanimously.
Southeastern also had one motion, and that was to accept as presented unanimously.
Eric?
The Northeastern region just had a motion to accept the permit numbers as presented, and it passed unanimously as well.
All right. All right, we don't have any public comments on this one. Rack motion sounds like it passed in all of them. Bring it back to the board for your discussion and disposition.
I'm afraid I should ask the question, but I guess it'd be for Darren. With the tick and everything that's been going on, and with Deseret requesting permits, did you have that discussion with them? And are they?
My understanding is the biologist has been in touch with them, and they're not requesting any change to the recommendation, either the biologist or Deseret. I think Ryan makes a good point. You know, with all this private property, we may detect less lost ticks just because we're not there, but and it is early in the year. I think given the number of permits we're recommending here, and the status of that population, that we're biologically not probably in any risk of damaging that population with these recommendations. But obviously it's up to you all to decide.
I guess my comment, what I think is we just reduce permits on the Morgan Southridge for the public. The one tag that is on the previously mentioned CWMU that only wanted one permit will go to the public this year. I'm debating, I'm wondering about possibly when the Deseret permits is cutting one public and one private to be in line with what we just did on the public ground. That's kind of my thoughts.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we accept the CWMU antlerless permits as recommended, with the exception of the Deseret Land and Livestock cow moose permit, that we reduce it by one public and one private permit.
I'll second that.
Seconded
I'll
by
second
Ryan. Okay. All right, any discussion on the motion? We will have 4 vote and 2 recuse. So
I make that second because I recuse myself. I'm sorry about that.
okay, Kent got it. Right? Okay. Stacy, did you get that? Kent. All right, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Vote passes. 4 affirmative and 2 recused. All right.
Mr. Chair, before we move on, could I clarify one thing real quick? Sure. With the new cow moose permits that were just set, just in the spirit of transparency, we'd like to know what to do with resident versus non-resident on those hunts. With the rest of once in a lifetime, usually add up all the permits for a species and then allocate 10% non-resident, and we stick it on either one hunt or multiple hunts, depending on what's available. Now that the cow permits have been changed, there's 7 total permits. Do we want to allocate a non-resident permit? If so, which hunt? That sort of thing. Does the board have any preference on that?
Well, my brain tells me if we give 10% and we don't have 10, then there might not be a non-resident permit this year, but.
So we've handled this a couple different ways, in the past, especially on antlers, if there's 5. So the U Bighorn, for example, we have 5 permits. We do 4 and 1 because it's 5 rounds to 10. Under the original recommendations, we were recommending 5 on the Wasatch, which would have been 4 and 1. And then would have been 6 and 1 on that Morgan, any legal weapon hunt. So just trying to clarify what the board would like to do, or if you want to look at it individually as hunts, none of those would round up to 10. So it's just how the board would like to handle that.
Those are good points. Can we include I want to have a little discussion on this, maybe with all of this, but could we include the rack chairs a little bit on this discussion
Yeah, I think
as
we ought
well?
to.
I'd like to hear opinions.
Gentlemen, what do you think?
I think for me, I just start to default. There's not 10. Let's just keep it to residents only, but that's just where my mind goes to.
I generally agree. I'm a big non-resident fan because I hunt in other states. And so I agree that if we're going to go below 10, we probably shouldn't have one, but we should never go to 20%, a 4 and 1 or something like that. But I'm a big fan of having a tag available for non-residents.
In this particular instance,
If we're going below 10, I don't think we should have one, but
Yeah.
Okay. Austin.
Couple things to consider when we don't have a hunt, we freeze everybody's bonus points, and that's fair. But if you still have a hunt for residents and you don't for non-residents, you've only frozen one of those categories. So you've made the non-residents stay where they're at. So you stand to lose quite a bit of revenue. There's a few hundred non-residents that apply for cow moose at $21 an application. You stand to lose a lot of those if you cut non-resident completely. And then they can't stay at the same point pool as residents. Why does that matter? Some people end up moving to Utah. Some people move out of state. So I would like to see one tag there just so that it keeps non-resident revenue coming in and it gives them a chance. Wherever you put that tag, I don't think it matters, but I would like to see one, even though it doesn't hit at 10%.
Scoot.
I think in this case, and, just going along with some of the discussion that happened in our rack regarding the bull elk, I think that I guess I can't speak for them, but I would say that we'd probably be in favor of going for one non-resident tag, especially since the number 7 is a lot closer to 10 than, being a super low number, making it a really high percentage.
Eric.
I spent yesterday looking at a bunch of water resource projects, and it's kind of that dismal thing. Sometimes you have a drought and you've got to just split things down. So as my thoughts have been, if it's 10 or under, that may be something you could remove the non-resident tag for that time, but I'm also a fan of a non-resident. Is there a possibility they could still apply for points, kind of to Austin's discussion? Could they still apply for points although there's no tag available? Is that an option?
So Lindy, you said, yeah, because moose are still available to hunt in Utah, just not to non-residents. Would it still allow them to garnish a
Maybe I can
bonus point?
clarify before Lindy's head explodes. I maybe shouldn't have mentioned the option of not having a non-resident altogether. I think our preference would be to keep both those point pools in play, have one, and just decide where to allocate it. If we had a preference, it would be on the hunt with the most permits, which is that Morgan Southridge and illegal weapon. But I'll let you comment.
So if we eliminate all the non-resident, permits, then no, they could not purchase a point because they can't apply for a resident permit. So they would be sitting out a year of buying points.
All right, back to the board for.
Why is everything got to be so complicated? So, the reason that I made the motion and stand by is I want biologically, I'm looking out for the benefit of the moose population in this particular unit. And I guess this is what the consequence of that is now working these numbers out. I'd probably lean to make it more simple and to allow one permit to go to a non-resident. I hope we're not setting a precedence to change percentages, but that'd be my only argument against me wanting one resident.
If that's a motion, I agree. I think we got to give them at least one. So, well, just one.
Okay, do you want to make that in a form of a motion? Justin?
You have a comment on that?
I agree with Justin, yeah. I think one of them should be able to go to a non-resident. I'm good with that.
I'll make the motion that we split the antlerless moose permit, or that we allow one non-resident to apply for the antlerless moose permit.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Sorry, just to clarify, that's going to be in the any legal weapon portion. Okay.
Yeah, for that, yes. All right, are you good, Rusty, with that?
Correct, of the Morgan Southridge, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Sorry for that interruption.
Oh, no, yes, you're good. All right, we're now down to the aquatic rule amendment. We've got Randy here to speak to it. Do we need to take a break? Are we good?
Okay, it's afternoon now, so good afternoon. Before the board discusses the DWR's aquatic rule proposal, I briefly want to touch on how we developed this proposal and why the proposed changes are a win for our private aquaculture partners in the state. We didn't build this proposal in a vacuum. Over the past 6 months, we've been in regular contact with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, including 3 separate meetings and multiple phone calls, emails, and text messages. We kept UDAF informed about changes in our rule language as the rule was being developed. UDAF asked a lot of questions about the process for purging New Zealand mud snails from fish prior to stocking, but any concerns they had about the actual rule proposal were not expressed during these conversations. In addition, the division presented the rule changes to Utah's private fish producers at a January meeting to a positive response. That presentation mentioned when we were planning on taking these changes to the RAC and Wildlife Board. We specifically engaged with the one fish producer who has New Zealand mud snails. We answered questions that he had and invited him to participate in the development of the rule with no response. The DWR also responded to his request to set up meetings for additional discussions, but he never responded to confirm dates. Ultimately, the goal of this proposal is to balance industry needs with the protection of Utah's fisheries. New Zealand mud snails reproduce asexually, so it only takes one stray snail to start a new population. Currently, if a hatchery has these snails, they have to purge every single load of fish prior to stocking, and that's a very labor-intensive and time-consuming process. Our proposal moves us towards a common-sense case-by-case approach that we feel provides additional opportunities for the private aquaculture industry while protecting our native wildlife species. In the vast majority of cases under our proposal, we'd allow stocking without purging. We would require purging in situations where stocking could potentially impact native spring snails. Under this proposal, there are situations where we may deny a certificate of registration, but those situations would be rare and would be limited to scenarios where the stocking poses an extremely high risk to our native spring snails. Our proposal provides critical mechanisms that will protect our native spring snails, many of which have been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. The main reason native spring snails have not been listed is because there are safeguards in place that prevent New Zealand mud snails from invading their habitat. Our proposal keeps the essential safeguards in place, which should help prevent a federal listing. If native spring snails were to be listed, it would be problematic for private growers and landowners, and the federal listing could even impact our public fisheries. The proposal also helps open doors. Arizona has restricted the import of fish from growers that have New Zealand mud snails, but Arizona has indicated they're willing to adopt regulations similar to what we're proposing. This paves the way for our local producers to get back into that market. It should be noted that under our proposal, all stocking by growers that have New Zealand mud snails would require a certificate of registration. The pond owners themselves request these certificates of registration, so this proposal does not add burden to the fish grower. We currently use the certificate of registration and review process to protect our native cutthroat trout while allowing some stocking of non-native trout for sport fish purposes, and we plan to adapt this process to the needs of our native spring snail populations. The bottom line is that our proposal would allow private fish growers that have New Zealand mud snails to avoid the labor-intensive purging process for the majority of their sales in the state while maintaining safeguards that protect Utah's native spring snails. Lastly, we are proposing one additional amendment to Administrative Rule R657-3C, subsection 9, that is not in the board packet. Currently, as proposed, rule prohibits any water discharge from facilities that hold fish. However, this requirement is technically impractical as most hatcheries and ponds are designed to discharge water as a standard part of their operation. To address this, we propose updating the language in subsection 9, part 3B to state all effluent from holding tanks must be managed to eliminate the potential for discharge in the public waters. Private ponds, licensed aquaculture facilities, and licensed fee fishing facilities are exempt from this requirement. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have today.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions from the board? Questions from the RAC chairs? Rock.
So the woman that visited our RAC she said she was the one from UDAF that was over the permitting on this, and she said you hadn't consulted with her, but now you're saying you have consulted with her 3 times. Who's telling the truth?
I think in the end, there were the wires crossed heading into that rack. The answer is yes, we did communicate ahead of that, but there were some wires crossed. We have rectified that since that rack meeting. So.
Any others from the racks? All right. Do we have any public comments on this one?
We did have 4 submissions or 4 comments on this. 3 of them strongly agreed with the division's proposal, while 1 comment remained neutral. No specific comments were written.
Okay, thank you. Any comment, Carl? All right, we've got some comment cards. First hear from Andy Satterley, and then we'll hear from Amanda Price.
Hi there, my name is Andy Satterley. I manage a fish ranch down in Richfield, Cove River Ranch. They've been in operation since 1910, and we've been sending out fish for quite some time now. I do represent one of the private growers. Our ranch does have the snail. They came out and did an AIS inspection last August and found it. So we've been kind of dealing with what all the snail is. As a private grower, though, we do support the division's proposal for these rule changes. It's going to greatly help us get some sales back, and it's also going to help some of the state-run facilities that do have the snail as well. It's kind of tough when you say New Zealand mud snail on an aquatic invasive species list. It's a little scary. I did some research as best I could. The snail was put on the list because it does reproduce asexually. It reproduces very rapidly, and it also could potentially outcompete a native spring snail. It does not impact fish health. And I do remember, I guess, Randy mentioning something about talking with the other surrounding states that over the last 20 years, there's been no real observable impact that the New Zealand mud snail has had on the environment. So there's not really a lot of data that shows this snail is doing any type of damage or anything like that. They are worried that it does impact a native spring snail. I can tell you on our ranch, we have that native spring snail as well. And we also had the New Zealand mud snail. We did treat our water with copper sulfate, and we pretty much murdered all the snails that we have on the ranch. We are attempting to make it so that we can get back into states like Arizona. They are one of our biggest customers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of pounds worth of fish go to them every year. In August, when we found out that we had the snail, I called Arizona Fish and Game first thing and told them that we had it, and pretty much stopped all of our business going out there. So with this proposal that the division has, Arizona is one of the states that's looking to see what Utah does to get back on track. And the stuff that we're proposing today is going to make it so that we can possibly get back into Arizona, get back into Colorado, and some of the other surrounding states to start making some money. Right now, our business is severely impacted. We're not making anything. And with these rule changes, it's going to open the doors for us to get back and finally make some money. We really do appreciate all the stuff like the division is doing. Drew Cushing and Randy Opplinger, the Department of Agriculture, the guys Xavier Matheson, Amanda Price, are all on board with helping our ranch get back on track, and we do appreciate that. I know there was some mention that we were all invited to meetings or supposed to have meetings, and I think there's just a little miscommunication. I know Amanda came to one of the RAC meetings and said something about not agreeing with the requirement of the COR. That's the certificate of registration for pond owners. It's a little bit of a slow process right now. There's no point on the application online to tell where the fish are coming from. So something like that would have to change if we move forward with these proposed rule changes. It'd be nice if they could make the form available online to fill out and maybe even make payments online. That way it could streamline the process. Right now you have to download the application and mail it in via snail mail, which I'm not a fan of. It's a little slow process. But if we could make something like that a little more streamlined, it would help us get back on track a lot quicker and get our customers some fish. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Amanda.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. My name is Amanda Price. I'm the state veterinarian at the Department of Agriculture and Food, and my program oversees the fish health program.
Excuse me, turn your mic on, please.
There we go. The fish health program licenses and oversees private aquaculture facilities and fee fishing facilities within the state. As was mentioned at the Central RAC meeting, I did express several concerns about the proposed rule changes, specifically about the implementation of the rule and the level of interagency collaboration. Many of these concerns stemmed from communication gaps between our agencies and miscommunication within my own office, and I take full responsibility for these communication failures, as well as for, shall we say, the less than ideal manner in which our concerns were presented. Drew Cushing and Randy Opplinger were kind enough to meet with me the following day to discuss our concerns, and we were able to find common ground through that discussion and subsequent conversations. First, I would like to thank the division for the amendment to R 657 3C9. The initial version, as was mentioned, would have prohibited discharge into public waterways from most of the aquaculture facilities and ponds within the state. This updated language provides a practical solution that ensures our state's aquaculture facilities can continue to operate while protecting wild populations from diseases spread by aquatic animals from wild or non-health approved sources. I greatly appreciate the division being willing to make this rule change for New Zealand mud snails, which, to be honest, primarily benefits private aquaculture. This risk-based approach is a significant step in supporting the private aquaculture industry, and we are grateful that it was proposed. I did listen in on all of the RAC meetings and recognize the concerns raised by some RAC members regarding the protection of our native spring snails, as well as the concerns from the industry regarding the COR requirement. While we initially had reservations about the COR process, primarily regarding the expense to small pond owners and its impact on sales from positive facilities, our recent discussions have helped us better understand the reasoning for this requirement. We now understand that each pond requesting a COR will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis to manage risk, which could be a significant time commitment from the division. Randy and I have discussed developing an internal procedure once this rule is passed to clearly outline the criteria for these decisions. This will help provide helpful transparency for pond owners, as well as offer peace of mind to those concerned about the long-term protection of our native snails. The division has also been very helpful in evaluating the purging protocol that my fish health specialist and I developed for a producer that has New Zealand mud snails. And this protocol was largely based on research done by Randy at Division Hatcheries. I want to be clear, the last thing I want to do as a state veterinarian is to contribute to the spread of invasive species or diseases within the state. I believe that our purging protocol does dramatically reduce the risk of these snails from private stocking, but I also understand the risk of having your hands tied by a federal agency, and therefore the not one snail approach to critical habitat areas. Again, I would like to thank the division for their willingness to propose this rule change, as well as the open dialogue that we have had over the past few weeks. As the state agency that oversees private aquaculture facilities and fee fishing ponds, we promise to do our part to minimize the risk to spring snails. I encourage the Wildlife Board to approve this rule change. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so to summarize our RAC motions, Northern Region, Southeastern, and Northeastern, it passed unanimously. In the Central, oh, sorry. Yeah. All righty. We'll now hear from the RAC chairs. Please report on your RAC meetings and the motions and the count.
In the Northern Region, we had one motion that was to accept the rule amendments as presented, and that passed unanimously.
The Central Region had one motion to reject the proposal as presented, and that passed 9-2. It sounds like a lot of that has been reconciled.
Southern Region had one motion to accept as presented with the included additional amendment to R6573C, and that passed 6-3 with the opposing votes still feeling that it was too much risk to take on and allow.
It's good.
In the Southeast region, there was one motion to approve the division's recommendation as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Eric.
Northeastern region also passed unanimously to accept the rule recommendations as presented.
All right, thank you. So it sounds like it passed with exception of Brock's, well, Central. And I was there for that one, and so I saw that one down, and it sounded like I checked on it very shortly after that, and the issues have been remedied. So I think we're good. We'll bring it back to the board for discussion and entertain a motion.
Approve the aquatic rule amendments as presented.
Okay, motion by Chris.
I'll second. And I do want to say thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you coming and clarifying some of those things for us. And that's big of you. Thanks.
Seconded by Paula. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Aye, and raise your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have one other business item. We're going to have Dex Mingus come up. Okay. Okay, all right. Well,
Southern region. I felt really picked on that I didn't get to give like a big presentation during the spring big game permit recommendation. So I have a 45-minute presentation I'll pull up right now. Just kidding. We started a new program this last year called the Legacy of Land Award, where we recognize landowners across the state that have really made significant contributions to Mule Deer through how they manage their land and working together with the division as partners. We presented those awards at banquets and at the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo. We actually presented an award to Chris Robinson on the board. And we had ordered some really cool custom belt buckles for the recipients of this award. And they were late getting to us. They did finally get to us. And I just wanted to present the buckle to Chris today. And again, in this venue, just thank Chris for his contributions and all he does, as well as the other landowners that received this award this year. So I just brought this for you, Chris. I think it'll go great with your bolo tie.
Now I'm gonna have to get a belt, but there was problems, right? Thank you.
thanks, Dex. Seeing no other business, I'll entertain a motion to.
Can I maybe mention one thing?
Yes.
Just in the action log concerning Antelope Island, we have that on there talking about season dates. And it kind of slipped my mind, but during both our deer permit recommendations and our once in a lifetime recommendation, in those recommendations, there were 2 management tags presented added to the Antelope Island, and also one more sheep tag, which I think are great things, but just another reason why that's on the action log, that we discuss season dates and make sure that with the number of permits on there, that this season dates fit and work for all of those who are recipients of those permits. So I just wanted to make sure that that's noted, that the reason that's on the action log was for that purpose.
All right, thank you, Justin. Anything else today? All right, I have been informed that lunch is here, and for those of you who are here, you're welcome to stay and eat. There's enough for everybody, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Kent, seconded by Justin. We're adjourned.
Thanks, guys.